Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through a perpetually lefty, pinko, commie, soy boy, cuck, Antifa, super soldier filter. But more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig. I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. My tastes range, but mostly exist on opposite ends of the highbrow, lowbrow spectrum. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. I use she/they pronouns. I work in higher ed, and I run a food pantry. I care about food access, reproductive justice, building a robust social welfare state, and ending the state's domination through the criminal legal system. I'm a staunch defender of Adam McKay teaching the people about mortgage-backed securities via celebrities, and I like movies that don't feature Christian Bale grunting through silicone triple chins. Yeah, we'll dive in deep to the fat suit. Also, just before we get into our typical bits, while you were reading the intro this time, I was thinking about one of my parents recently started listening to the pod, and it's occurring to me right in this moment, like, I wonder if they know, like, what soy boy means.
Oh, okay. Hal's mom and dad. Soy boy.
So I'm going to have to dive into that on a phone call.
Yes, soy boy, it is definitely fallen out of favor amongst, like, right-wing insults in 2023, but it had its heyday, let's say, 2014 to 2016.
Yeah, I think it definitely co-varies with the Trump.
Yeah. And the insult mostly existed, I guess, was liberals are wimps, and wimps drink soy.
Oh no.
And soy is going to give you breasts and feminize you.
Yes, because there is a belief that soy milk has estrogen in it. Yeah.
Which it does, right? But not to, like, any degree.
Right, but you can't drink estrogen,
right,
or people that are trans feminine would drink estrogen.
Right, it's not going to change your body chemistry by drinking soy milk. Because if it would, Florida would outlaw it.
Right. So, brief detour, but that was kind of cracking me up. I was sitting here thinking about it. So, Craig, what other pop culture are you getting into these days?
Oh, I've gotten into a lot. I am off work for a little while, so I've been diving deep into some stuff. First off, I want to shout out a book that I read that I really liked, even though it is kind of like pop science, pop psychology, but it was very helpful for me. I read a book called How to Break Up with Your Phone, which was very necessary for me. I can't remember the author's name, so I'm going to find it. I wrote How to Break Your Phone. That's not...
I could tell you all about that.
How to Break Up with Your Phone is written by Catherine Price, and it is like just kind of common sense stuff, but just she's a journalist or a columnist, so yeah, not like a doctor or anything, so it's not pretending to be scientific. It's just kind of like common sense things on how to be more present and spend less time doom scrolling, which is something I need. So yeah, just want to shout that one out. But
nice.
A few big things I want to talk about is I watched Chop and Steal.
What is this?
Do you know Chop and Steal in any context at all?
I don't think so.
Okay, so Chop and Steal are these guys that I've been following for a while, and their names are Joe Pickett and Nick Pruer. Do you know what the Found Footage Festival is?
Yes.
Okay, so it's those two guys. Oh. And for anybody that doesn't know what the Found Footage Festival is, it's these two guys, Joe Pickett and Nick Pruer, who are comedians, although not necessarily in the typical sense. They're not really writers. They don't do stand-up. They do the Found Footage Festival, which is, ever since they were teenagers, they were obsessed with weird, bizarre VHS tapes that you would find, like, at garage sales and stuff. And they have amassed, like, an insane collection of VHS tapes, and they go on. It's almost like Mystery Science 3000, but with weird VHS tapes. And so they go on tour and they show them to people and comment over them and all that. But where you might have seen them is they, over the past several years, have done a series of pranks on local news stations, which, like, I'm of two minds about pranks. I like a prank that is well thought out and has a target that is deserving. I'm not, like, a fan of pranks in general, like, hey, bro, I stole your phone. Got you, homie. And like that kind of like prank of like, oh, you got so triggered when I smacked you in the face. Like that kind of prank. I hate that shit.
I think a good prank has to have, and before I say what I'm about to say, huge disclaimer. I am not saying implied consent exists in other iterations, forms, or contexts. Yeah. But I think that between friends, there can be implied consent.
Yeah, certainly.
For prankery
and like
for
things that would cross the line
jesting
with other people.
Yes, for jovial jesting with each other. And those kind of pranks I support. If someone would not have agreed to participating in a generalized version of whatever was happening to them ahead of time, then no, that's not a prank, that's a cruel trick.
Then maybe you wouldn't like their pranks because the people they're pranking are not in on it.
No. I don't mean that they're in on it. I mean that afterwards they would have like agreed to like being okay with a generalized and
and some of
an
them
overview
were
of what it was, if not the details.
Some of them were, but the pranks that they did was in doing the found footage festival and having to do like the grueling like morning news shows on like whatever city they were touring in, they realized that all these morning news programs are the same. None of them do their due diligence on who their guests are. So they started just writing morning shows pretending they had an act that they were terrible at and getting booked on local morning news shows. So there were several viral clips. One was Chef Keith, who went on, which was Nick Pruer pretending to be a famous chef who wrote a book, telling a local news anchor, doing a bit on what to do with your Thanksgiving leftovers. And it is immediate once the camera turns on that this person does not know what they're talking about. And that one, he put a bunch of Thanksgiving leftovers in a blender and got a news anchor to drink it, which was very funny. Do you know who Mark Proksch is? Do you watch What We Do in the Shadows?
Yes.
He's the energy vampire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bald man.
Yeah, so he actually, I didn't realize this until I watched the movie. He got famous from one of these pranks. He went on as Kenny Strasser, a.k.a. K-Strass, a yo-yo champion, who does not know how to do the yo-yo at all on a local news show and is just swinging it around and has very funny moments where he panics and just looks at the newscaster and goes, what do I do? What do I do? But these two guys wrote this for him. But their magnum opus was this thing called Chop and Steal, which was they booked themselves on several morning news shows throughout the country as a strongman duo called Chop and Steal. And when you look at them, they are not a strongman duo. Like one of them is kind of short and wiry, and the other one like looks like a little like me, like a big dude, a little bit of a gut, not very muscly, but it doesn't take a lot to realize they're not a strongman duo.
They're not who they say they are.
So then they get booked and they do stunts like, oh, this is a really easy one you can do around the house, and just have twigs that they picked up in the parking lot, and one of them going, hi-ya! And chopping them, and like all the newscasters having to be like, wow, impressive. And like they just made these morning news shows look like morons.
Yeah, I guess I feel differently if it's like random people traversing their day versus like
a deserving target, which is these news shows that maybe
pointing out the follies of an institution.
Yes, so the movie Chop and Steal is one of these like major news conglomerates that like owns like, you know, these huge companies that bought out all these local news stations. Gray Television is the name, sued them for fraud. And like threatening, like these dudes are not necessarily like famous, they're not rich, and like they were facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and like these guys are good dudes, and I think like in the fight for the right reason, because they had multiple opportunities where the settlement was you need to offer an apology, and on principle they were like no. And they fought it, and they eventually won and settled out of court. But the movie Chop and Steal is about them and it's a documentary about them and about the fight against Gray Television and how they got sued for basically just doing a prank.
Where is this viewable?
It is on, you can rent it wherever, Amazon, Apple, all that. They have... They're touring the movie right now, playing in like local. If you go to their site, it's on there like where they're playing it.
Okay, so it's a new release.
Newish. I think it came out in 2022, but it was real small, so it's like kind of
building up
slowly
steam
been
and
unfolding.
kind of expanding
Yeah.
distribution. Nice.
But yeah, these guys are really funny. I like them a lot. And the documentary is like weirdly human, like because these are two guys that have been friends since high school and have done everything together. And like there's these great moments where like they're just straight up annoying each other and like they're getting sick of being on the road together, but they still love each other. And it's just this very like sweet picture of a friendship too. And one of them, Joe Pickett, I want to say, like, this dude is like, he's committed to, like, he just loves what he does, the Found Footage Festival. So Mark Proksch, I can't remember. So he got kind of discovered by the Office writers from this Case Strass, the yo-yo expert bit. And he is actually on The Office for several seasons, like, intermittently. And when this happened, they offered Joe Pickett a job as a writer on The Office. And he's like, I don't really like that show. That doesn't seem like a job for me. I just want to do Found Footage Festival. And he did. Like, he never took any job that came calling. Like, he just wants to do Found Footage Festival because it's, like, what he loves. He does it with his best friend. And it's just really, like, funny, sweet documentary.
Respect.
Yeah.
You know your lane.
Yeah. I loved it. The other thing I want to talk about is I'm playing a new video game. It's not a new video game. It's new to me. But it's called Detroit Become Human. Do you know about it?
I have never heard of this combination of words.
It is a narrative story-based game. It's put out by Quantic Dream, who are the people that released Heavy Rain, which was like a murder mystery story-based game. And then they also did a game called Beyond Two Souls, which I never played. I don't really remember what the premise is, but you might remember it by saying like, oh, why is Elliot Page fully in a video game? That was that video game. So Detroit Become Human is an AI story where you play as three different why can't I think of the word? What is an AI? What do you call an AI human? Android. There we go. You play as three different androids slowly coming to the realization that they have like feelings. And you get like presented with several moral issues depending on how you respond to them as an android, it will dictate the rest of the game and the story. Is really cool. And it's got like crazy ass cast for a video game. Jesse Williams is one of the androids, but then supporting actors Clancy Brown is in it and Lance Henriksen is dope. Yeah,
I love some Lance.
And finally, the thing I want to talk about, because it's imminent, is tomorrow. I'm so excited.
Whoop,
is the return of The Righteous Gemstones.
I fucking love this show.
And have you seen the cast for season 3?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is stacked.
Already an amazing cast. They've added, for season 3, Steve Zahn, Stephen Dorff, Shea Wiggum, Lucas Haas, and Sturgill Simpson. It's going to be wild. I'm so excited.
And I really enjoyed the first season of the show, and it was one of those shows I felt, at least initially, like, where are they going to take this? Because I think sometimes and on the whole, I really like Danny McBride's body of work.
Yeah, me too.
Kind of a gruff, unfinished wild man is an archetype that I like to see on film. And but sometimes it's like, what's the direction? What's like going to be the continued thrust of this? And it really is navigated so well and is
so
consistently funny,
intriguing. Like,
yeah,
I love when a comedy is also invested in the story that it's telling. And like, God, and first off, God, I gotta remember her name because she's
great family drama, like Succession. Who?
Right. Yeah. It is Succession, just with like Southern Baptist,
but goofy
preachers.
as hell in Southern Baptist.
And a quick shout out for Righteous Gemstones, because like the MVP of that show, literally every episode is Edie Patterson, who's like one of the funniest people on the planet, and God damn, she's so funny.
And also like they thread the needle of like there's a lot of different kinds of comedy. Like there's physical comedy. Yep. There is gross out comedy. A lot of stuff happening with Adam. What's his
Devine.
last? Adam Devine.
With Keith.
Keith.
Who's my favorite. Keith.
There's like gross out humor. There's physical humor. There are like kind of overarching jokes that pay off like episodes later. Like there's it's deft, it's there's a lot going on there, and I really look forward to this season.
Yeah. And I also like when like something finally makes me get someone. Do you know, like, okay, so the movie Pop Star, I was never like big into The Lonely Island, and then the movie Pop Star, I was like, oh, I get The Lonely Island now. Like, I get what they're doing. I understand it. And I never really was like, I didn't really understand why Adam Devine was that funny. Like, I don't know, I was never big into Workaholics. And then I saw this and I was like, okay, he is now clicks for me. I understand what Adam Devine is doing in things. And I love that show.
Yeah, whoever the casting director is,
give him a
should
raise.
should win an award because they really cinched it.
What about you? What have you been getting into?
So, in terms of TV, I finally started watching the other two.
Oh yeah. I've only watched the first season. I haven't watched what are they on, season 3?
3, yeah, just released, or is released. I'm not honestly sure if it's synchronous or asynchronous, but I started watching it because I kept hearing about it. It's gotten really good. The 3rd season has gotten really good reviews. I've had some friends mention it, so I finally decided to dive in. And I mentioned on the pod before, I'm not a huge TV person. I generally kind of keep TV for reality TV, maybe a prestige drama, and otherwise I really invest my time for media consumption in movies, for visual media consumption. But this show is really funny, and it feels like a combination between Party Down and 30 Rock, which makes sense given the creators and writers and who the casts are. But I mean, Ken Marino his role is not central, right? I mean, he's present. He's definitely in, if not every episode, nearly every episode. But he just, every time he's on screen, he is delivering.
So funny.
There was an episode from early on season 2 where there was a line read from him that I made I rewinded it like 4 times because he was so rubber-faced that he was delivering like 4 or 5 different expressions within like 10 seconds. And I was like, we got to watch it again. Like, I got to break this down and just fully see the genius on the page. But I'm really loving it, and it makes me cackle.
It's really good. And Kim Marino has a talent to be the straight man and the screwball kind of simultaneously. And it's really good.
Yeah, and like the fuck up who like very genuinely wants to be included, and by nature of striving to be included is excluding himself, you know. And
he's the agent, right? The kid's agent. Yeah.
For those of Streeter is his is his character's name, but at one point in time when he's being baptized, this is in season 2 I think, but he's being baptized, and the guy who's baptizing him, which is a riff on Hillsong,
hell yeah.
As he's being baptized, the pastor says his full name, and it's like Streeter Peter Peters. But
that's
it's
great.
The show is about 2 siblings who are in their like late 20s, very early 30s, who are, you know, wanted to be famous for different reasons and just have not been able to make that happen. And then their younger brother becomes very famous very suddenly because of like essentially a TikTok video.
Yeah, he becomes like a kind of a Justin Bieber like social media star.
Streams.
Yeah.
And their mother, played by Molly Shannon, is also gets famous and essentially becomes kind of like an Oprah-esque figure. And it's called The Other Two because it's about the elder siblings trying to navigate pursuing their own fame, which maybe they have the opportunity for now. Right. But it's very funny. It's sardonic. It's highly critical of Hollywood and the fame machine, while, you know, kind of having that like insidery perspective. It's definitely worth watching if you have not seen it, and it's on Max.
Hell yeah. No HBO in that shit.
0 HBO. Eject it. The other thing, and I'll talk about this a little more, but it's part of why some parts of this are going to be a little thinner for me, is tomorrow I'm leaving for Portland for a week for a professional conference, which I am excited about, but also I'm an extremely nervous traveler.
Me too. Yeah. So planes or just traveling in general?
Well, there's like several axes of it. It's like I am terrified of heights and I hate flying.
Me too.
I have anxieties related to travel, just leading up to things, planning, major control freak issues. Then also when I was a child, a checked bag got lost, and it was like most of my clothing because I was traveling to visit a family member for like a 2-month period of time.
Yeah.
And a bunch of my clothes had to be replaced.
You never got it back?
No, we did, but it was like weeks.
Yeah.
And so I don't like checking bags, which for like a 2 to 3 day trip, not terribly stressful.
But
Once you get to like the hump of 4, 5, 6 days, it's like, so there's just a lot of things. Also, my husband will be gone on a work trip overlapping.
Okay.
So
not in Portland.
Dogs are not in Portland, in Mexico. Like,
oh, cool.
Yes, so there's just a lot of also, there's many swirling responsibilities and obligations. Also, I had like one of the busiest work weeks, or 2 successive weeks of my life thus far. So
God, you too, just metropolitan world travelers.
Just that Ativan riddled
I'm going to Manatee
crying
Springs.
crying silently in an aisle seat, saying the Lord's Prayer even though I'm not religious and have been an atheist since I was 16 years old.
Hey, I've been there though. On a plane.
Yes. So
I'll do anything.
A bright,
just don't let this thing crash.
Right, exactly. Please, just for that, whatever, the 2 hours and 17 minutes that we're not touching the ground.
Yeah.
But a little bright gem in that, for me, is that when I go to big cities outside of Tallahassee, I seek to see if there's like a independent theater where I can see a movie that I could not see in Tallahassee on a big screen.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I have tickets for early next week to go to a double feature of some Armond family flicks that are playing at Hollywood Theater in Portland. If you're not familiar, the Armond family, it was like a husband, wife, and one of their sons made a bunch of movies, totally independent of any big studios. And a lot of them are like, let's say, are playing in the key of exploitation. Okay. But some of the movies that they made were in service of a particular pastor who is very like fire and brimstone. Okay. So the 2 movies I'm seeing are called If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do, which came out in 1971, and The Burning Hell, 1974. The first one is about the communist threat to Christian America.
Hell yes. And
the second one is about hell. It's like a descent into hell.
Are these from like a Christian perspective?
Yes, but like it's supposed to be just like visually wild and very like explicit, and like they're depicting hell,
like Quentin Tarantino by way of Kirk Cameron.
Listen, I'd watch it. I would watch it. I'd be in the theater. So I am really excited to see these. It corresponds, the reason why they're having this screening is it corresponds, Powerhouse Films, which is based in the UK, is releasing a bunch of their, like I think like 13 of the Armond family movies in a a collection. And then also biographer Jimmy McDonough is releasing a book called The Exotic Ones, which is also the name of the film collection, about their lives. So this is just kind of something that is circulating right now. More people are paying attention, so I'm really excited to be able to see these 2 movies.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
On Tuesday. I also very recently rented from Cap City the DVD for Let the Corpses Tan. Have you heard of this?
Heard of it.
It's a 2017 movie. So I'll say this. It was visually really well constructed. Not really my thing. Because it's a Western.
Oh, really? That's right. Yeah.
But
like I might dig it.
Yes, I highly recommend. Have you seen The Strange Color of Your Body's Tears?
No, that's by someone interesting, right?
So it's a husband-wife duo. They also made this movie.
Okay. No, I have seen.
And how that is like a pastiche and kind of like a reinvention or reinscription of like Gaio. This is Let the Corpses Tan is like a reinscription or reinvention of kind of like a combination of Westerns and like Italian crime films.
Okay. And it's the same duo?
Yes, gotcha. Same husband-wife duo. But visually it's like beautiful and really well framed and like very thoughtful. It's just like the content, I'm just like, people are shooting each other over a bunch of gold that's on the side of a mountain. It's just not, I don't merely care for it.
So you're not going to see Sisu?
Sisu?
That I believe a similar premise. It's a movie that just came out that is about I don't think it's a Western per se, but it definitely has Western themes. It's a dude. It takes place during the 1940s, during World War II, and it's a dude that comes across a bunch of gold bullion and is just trying to escape wherever he is by being chased by like a bunch of Nazis.
See, I don't know. That sounds more like I think it's like very specifically the Western conventions of just like there's people that are like camped out in various places and they're shooting each other and then they're like saying one line of dialogue and then they're just like sitting here and looking out. That I don't care for. I like heist movies. I like action movies. You know, it's just like it was beautiful, but as I just detailed, I have a lot going on and I was just like this was nice, but maybe I shouldn't have watched it this week. Maybe is more the read on it for me. But
great title.
I think that you should watch it.
Yeah.
It's based on a book.
Okay.
Oh wait, I think I got to turn it into Cap City.
Oh,
you
hell
want to see the then the last thing I want to put over in a wrestling sense, meaning for non-wrestling fans, you know, I'm hyping it up that my main boy, my number one guy that I love in wrestling, MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, had a lovely match with Adam Cole on Wednesday at AEW Dynamite, last Wednesday, AEW Dynamite, where he laid out a gorgeous flying elbow. Yeah, click the link. It's in there.
I'm going to do it.
Click the link and watch it.
You know what? Oh, well, shut up. Nope. Didn't have to do that. Immediately start playing an ad into the microphone. Sorry about that.
It's okay. We can
mute that bad boy. Oh, actually, I was gonna put it on the screen, but now I'm afraid that it might do something with our recording, so I'm just gonna. Oh, dang! That was crazy.
Right?
The height on that bad boy.
Yes, he jumped high. So people would say, I would say the person, and I'm not saying it's, you know, this is necessarily a perfect comparison in terms of like exactly what he's achieving in his career or things of that nature, but in terms of the kind of heel work that he's doing and the way that he wrestles, there's a pretty obvious comparison to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
I've heard of him.
And I'm glad. If
do
you
watch
hadn't, I'd be like,
wrestling,
are you a pod person? Like, I'm concerned that you've been body snatched.
That would be... Oh, God. Can you imagine? Who is the last person to learn of who Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is? There must be someone.
I'm sure someone is hanging out on a beach somewhere, blissfully unaware of the second Jumanji movie. And for that...
I forgot they made one, so that might be me. I saw the first one on a cruise.
Honestly...
on an open deck of a cruise ship.
That's a great way to watch a movie.
It was, actually, yeah.
I saw Christmas Vacation for the first time.
On a cruise?
On a cruise ship like that.
Hell yeah.
Because it just wasn't one of our family's like go-tos, and I had seen bits of it, but I never like watched the movie, and I was just like drunk as hell on daiquiris hanging out with my family on the... I'm like,
That's the best one to watch, I think, though, of the four.
It's certainly drunk as hell on daiquiris on a cruise ship deck is the best way to interact with Chevy Chase's likeness.
Oh, yes. You know what's the worst of those four, but the one that I'm oddly just attached to because I watched it a million times when I was a kid. I loved the vacation movies when I was a child, and this one I watched so many times. Vegas Vacation, which is by far the worst.
Interesting. I don't think I've seen that. I think the only one I had seen prior to Christmas was the original one where they go to the
just
water
vacation.
Park, right?
Yeah. The Wally World.
Wally World.
Sorry,
yes.
folks, park's closed.
Yeah.
I love those movies.
Yes,
I mean,
I have seen.
Vegas Vacation has I was gonna say cameo, but no, he is fully a supporting character. Wayne Newton as himself.
Yes.
And it has one of the funniest line readings from Randy Crazyface. I can't remember his name now.
Quaid?
Randy Quaid, which is he encounters Wayne Newton and is just completely like gobsmacked, like can't find the words. It's just...
You know what? That's believable, given like the general direction of his Randy Quaid's life.
Vegas Vacation sucks. I'm an adult now. I can say that. It sucks. Randy Quaid is still hilarious in it. But the line, he just being completely gobsmacked, he finally just says, "Do you need a bodyguard? Because I'd die for you."
And I believe that in that moment, he was playing himself.
Yeah, he was, for sure. But yeah, awesome. So moving on to our current events, what's going on in the world that's either got you celebrating or living in despair?
So kind of like I was foreshadowing, like part of why I jam-packed the first part of our prompts, maybe usually I might have 2 or 3 things. I included some more is because the last 2 weeks have been really slammed for me with work, and I have massive travel anxiety. So aside from keeping up with the Trump indictments, when I've had free time later in the evenings, I've been engaging in some escapism, like I just described, or watching fucking Adam McKay movies, which I'm sure my husband is fully ready to be done with. So I'm sure he's very excited about the impending Clint Eastwood continuation.
At least you have to watch all those for one, like in a row.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So, I'm excited to hear what you have for this section. I do just want to push the abortion ballot initiative again. If you live in Florida, if you're a registered voter in Florida, please sign a petition and mail it in. Again, that link is flfree.link/petition. It's on our Twitter. You can find it in several episode descriptions.
And I'll put it in the show notes of this one, just like we have for the last couple as well.
We gotta get it. This is the chance that we have right now in Florida to secure this essential right. So, Craig, lay it on me. What were you getting into this week on Twitter?
Nothing important, as I do, but I have a weakness for like media vampires and grifters, and I have a new one that I love. Do you know who Just Pearly Things is?
No.
All right, she's terrible. Her like content on its own is not. It's terrible. Her name's Pearl, like Pearl Davis.
Okay, I was gonna say, is this like a like pearl clutching?
No, it's just her name is Pearl.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No. She that is a defining characteristic, is that she is not clever at all. Like there's no way that Pearl, like it should be like Just Pearly Things is not a phrase, but like Pearl, like you could come up with like a quippy show title with your name being Pearl.
Pearls before swine.
Right, anything. But no, it's Just Pearly Things. And it's a girl who's doing like live streaming YouTube content. And mostly what she's doing is just carrying water for like Andrew Tate and Fresh and Fit and like the Manosphere podcast. Do you know Fresh and Fit?
No.
So Fresh and Fit are like slightly more palatable Andrew Tate. Like they're not sex trafficking.
That we know of.
But they
allegedly.
are like, they have very firm like gender roles.
Are these the guys that they have all these like TikTok videos that are like them sitting across a table from each other? Okay. Yeah.
It's 2 dudes that are like, well, the reason that girls can't be with men for long terms is because of some stupid shit. And like literally her whole show is just like, I think she realized, she went on there on a few of them. She realized, I'm an asset to these guys because I'm a woman who will parrot their misogynist talking points.
Yeah, I am even though I said I didn't know who these people were, I am aware. I just have chosen to not allow their names and visages to stick.
Yeah. So the reason that I wanted to bring her up is because she just did a hilarious and disastrous debate with Ethan Klein of H3. Do you know Ethan Klein?
I think so.
Yeah, you've probably seen him. He's like been a big YouTuber forever. He does a show now with Hassan Piker called The Leftovers.
Yes.
Ethan Klein is like an interesting person. He kind of started out as like a kind of reactionary YouTube guy that like in the early days would do kind of like a little bit of like making fun of social justice warrior types. And he's had like a very candid and evolution in like his politics and his thinking. And now he does a show with Hassan Piker, who's like, the internet's like a socialist lover boy or whatever. So like he's fully kind of like moved over to the leftist side of things. But he did a hilarious interview with her where it is clear she did not prepare even for a single moment. And Ethan Klein is just handing her ass over and over again. And
this
it's not
sounds like a trash bag version of the Zizek Peterson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that is where I live on the internet. I love that shit. Like, and I don't like debate bros on the internet, and that is not. Oh, look at this. Oh my God. My lovely wife just brought me more coffee in the middle of us recording. Thank you so much. Do you want some?
Yes, please.
Here, get that right up there. I was trying to get it into the mic. This is going to play great.
I have a little. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jess.
Great robe.
Right?
Luxuriating.
But yeah, I don't like debate YouTube. So usually when I like watch a debate, it is someone that I know is going to be disastrous like this. Ethan Klein also did another hilarious debate a while back, a debate with a guy that did no research into him and thought that Ethan Klein was pro Andrew Tate because Ethan Klein did like a ironic title for a video that said like Andrew Tate did nothing wrong. And this guy, who is still a NXIVM cult member, was like, oh, this will be a great guy to do my propaganda on.
Wait, NXIVM still there are people still carrying water for...
Yeah. And Ethan Klein did a great interview with him where he pretended that he was a Andrew Tate fan and a NXIVM defender for a solid 45 minutes and just let this guy dig his grave over and over and over again. And then finally goes, you know, I fucking hate Andrew Tate and I think NXIVM are a bunch of sex traffickers, right? And the guy was like, oh, like this is too stupid. But anyways, you should watch the Just Pearly Things Ethan Klein debate because it is really funny.
God, and anyone with a moderately good camera and a YouTube channel can be Kings. Borat.
Yeah, I know.
You know, like that's a Borat bit basically.
And then the other thing that I want to talk about, because this is very serious, is we have now entered the primary season, and this is I'm calling it officially the Republican primary is the small dick primary because as Asawin Subsang wrote for Rolling Stone, he's a journalist, that Trump's campaign is now fully all his supporters in his campaign, his close circle, are telling Trump the strategy is to talk about how tiny Ron DeSantis' penis is, which is just great where we are. I want to just read this excerpt from Asawin Subsang's Rolling Stone articles. Now, some of Trump's longtime advisors are even urging him to continuously make reference to the size of DeSantis' penis, telling him such insults could stick with GOP primary voters and mess with his rival's head. Two sources with knowledge of the matter tell Rolling Stone. Trump's team discussed having Trump refer to the Florida governor as Tiny D. While some understood it as a shot at DeSantis' height, the sobriquet was specifically intended to suggest diminutive genitalia for people familiar with the topic say. And this is my favorite quote that a source close to Trump said. He is short, but yes, of course it's about his penis. That's why we're doing it. Tiny D, which is still not as good as Meatball Ron.
Meatball Ron
is the best
just
one.
Has such a good punch. And I'm, as a Italian-American, always here for some good Italian X, anti-Italian X racism. Yeah. That's a joke. If you cannot, it's a joke. Okay, don't cancel me. Anyway, I don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, obviously, like making jokes about the size of your opponent's genitalia as a man, like, has long been a tradition. When you're engaged in battle of some kind,
who among us?
Wills, battle of votes, etc. But I don't think it's like a coincidence that this is a target for jokes in the context of like the anti-trans hysteria we've been seeing, of just like this gender essentialization of like what, like policing of bodies and what one's body must look like and who must own what body parts. Like it just it drives me
and just like the talking
insane.
Out of two sides of your mouth of like, don't talk about genitalia to children, and then the other side of your mouth is, my opponent's got the smallest dick anybody's ever seen. It's like, where are you what planet are you living on? But I'm here for it because it's funny. I mean, it's disastrous but funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not the worst thing Trump's ever done, right? But it just, I just, clutch side of my head a little in pain at this, like, how much discussion of penises or not penises, vaginas or not vaginas, is centralized to our political discourse right now.
Right, and in 2016, there was a whole, like, dick measuring during the debates. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
When and he kept calling Marco Rubio tiny Marco,
little Marco, he called him, which also, I mean, again, it kind of gets down to the double entendre again, right? Like, yes, he's short, but also there are other implications being made about slights to his masculinity.
Just very clever.
I wonder sometimes if they just like trap Trump in a closet. Like they kind of confuse him. You know, they spin him around
Yeah.
a few times, like you're a kid where you put your head on the baseball bat before you have to like play a game, and then put him in a closet, shut him in there, and just say like, shout things out.
Oh yeah.
And then they just like write them down. And they go. Then they focus group.
Tiny D.
Right. They focus group the 50 phrases that he uttered while confused and dizzy, and
Get
then
Frank
land
Luntz
on
in
one.
there to. Do we like Tiny D or do we like Lil D better?
Speaking of Frank Luntz, I was surprised. I mean, I had seen Vice before, which we're gonna get to in a second, but like that he is not.
More central.
Yeah, that he doesn't get a named. You know,
That's
he's
a-
not
I
a
think
named figure.
We will get to it, but I think that's a big problem with Vice is its insistence that Dick Cheney was solely responsible for all the problems of the Bush era.
Rove is in like one scene. Okay,
Right,
we gotta,
yeah,
we
yeah,
gotta, we'll get there. We'll get there. But okay, before we get into the show proper, Craig, you want to do a little bit of a promo?
Yes, first and foremost, let's just say thank you to everyone who is listening to and has listened to the Red Rose Film
Thank
Club. And if you would like to be an absolute doll, please consider liking, sharing, and telling a friend about our podcast. And leave a comment or tweet at us. We love hearing from you all. And while we're also doing these promos, let's just shout out our next few in-person screenings at Cap City Video Lounge. That is the premier DVD rental and movie theater in Tallahassee. We do a screening on the first Friday of every month. We also call it the Red Rose Film Club. For July, on July 7th, we'll be watching Oliver Stone's Platoon. August 4th will be the Japanese film Battle Royale.
One of my favorite movies
Yeah,
ever.
it's a good one. September 1st, we're going to watch Black Klansman. And on October 6th, Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. So if you're in Tallahassee, please come out to those and say hey and watch some cool movies with us. But yeah, let's move on into the movie proper. So we are going to talk about 3 movies from Adam McKay, but let's put Adam McKay's career in a little bit of context first. Love him or hate him, I would probably be more on the love side when we talk about his earlier career. These were all very like formative movies for me.
Yeah, let's real quick. Why don't you go ahead and mention them, and then I want to hear like which of those is your favorite.
Okay, that's easy for me.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Love him or hate him, it would be impossible to talk about the state of comedy in the 2000s without mentioning Adam McKay. Along with his frequent partner, Will Ferrell, Adam McKay wrote and directed 3 of the most influential comedies of the 2000s. That would be 2004's Anchorman, 2006's Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby, and 2008's Step Brothers. Adam McKay's razor wit and sometimes poisonous tongue are on full display in these films, but what really characterizes his first 3 films are absurdity and oddly specific characters and their quirks. The first film marking a change in Adam McKay's focus was 2010's The Other Guys, a buddy cop movie starring Pharrell and Mark Wahlberg. Farrell. I said Pharrell, not the guy who sings Happy. Unlike his previous 3 movies, built on the absurdity of the premise, The Other Guys is a pretty straightforward comedy with those absurdist elements sprinkled throughout. But The Other Guys revealed itself to have some biting criticism aimed at bankers and those in charge of America's financial institutions. And by the end of Obama's second term, it seems McKay's focus had shifted from absurdist, crowd-pleasing comedies to more biting satire of America's institutionalized problems.
So great brief background. Let's go back to those first 3.
Oh yeah.
What's your favorite?
Step Brothers.
Okay.
Step Brothers. It would be Step Brothers, Anchorman, Talladega Nights. I like all 3, but I just have such a soft spot for Step Brothers and how stupid it is, and yeah.
For me, Talladega Nights is like by far
Oh,
my
I
favorite.
love to hear that because I feel like that's the one that I have to frequently defend and be like, no, it's funny because I feel like that's the one that gets shit on the most of those 3 Will Ferrell, Adam McKay movies.
I think some of this has to do with like family, specific context. So much of one of the things I love about movies is that, well, obviously they can be solitary experiences. A lot of movies I do watch alone, but they can also be really shaped by cultural context, by family history, by kind of social lineage, and that is like a movie of my family. Like my family watched that movie a lot.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
In the years after it came out, whereas for me, Anchorman, especially 2004, that came out when I was in middle school. Well, actually both those movies came out while I was in middle school. and Step Brothers came out while I was in high school. But Anchorman was just like something that like was R-rated. So
I think it was PG-13.
Was it? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
My family did not, like, I did not watch that as a family.
Yeah.
Honestly, it being R-rated wouldn't make a difference because we watch like Stripes all the time.
Yeah,
Which, if you don't recall the Bill Murray vehicle Stripes, there is an extended scene at the beginning of the movie of women mud wrestling with tits out.
That's mostly what I remember. I've only seen Stripes once, and it was okay. This is gonna be a thing.
Oh, let's talk about it.
D now is
D now.
Okay. The D stands for discipleship now. And I was raised in like a Southern Baptist church, and there was a thing they would do every year called D now, discipleship now, which was gendered. So the boys would go to one house, the girls would go to another.
Yes, we didn't call it that, but yes.
And you would have like what's really facing boys in the church these days, or what's really so it was mostly like don't have sex. It was mostly like what the curriculum was.
Your hand will grow fur if you masturbate. Yeah.
So we did that. It was we were all like 20 high school boys in this in one dad's house, and we had our whole like don't have sex, don't even acknowledge that girls have body parts, don't do any of that. Like we are here, don't do it, don't do that, and then it ends, and it's like a sleepover. You stay the night, and then it ends, and the dad goes, "All right, who wants to watch Stripes?"
Perfect.
So
Amazing.
After all this, like, don't look at a girl, and then we watch Stripes, which is just like you said, just like
there's probably like literally 30 distinct tits in that movie.
Yeah, so it was a very odd way to have seen Stripes for the first and only time.
Let's say there was a funny pattern of behavior in my household growing up where we would watch movies on like TBS or USA or some equivalent, and it would be edited. My dad would be like, "Oh, I love that movie. I love that movie in the 80s. Yeah. Like, let's go buy a DVD of it." And then, of course, all of the most explicit aspects are cut for the TV iteration, and then be playing the DVD and be like, "Oh yeah, sorry about this, guys." But then, once it's out there and been exposed and we've talked about it, then that's just the version of the movie that we're watching. And there are a lot of lines from that are very quotable in my family. So like Czechoslovakia, In and Out, it's like Wisconsin is like a go-to. Also, my mom is from Wisconsin, so that was, all the Francis stuff. You can call me Francis, I kill ya. Is like,
I've seen it the one time, but I do recognize some of these just as like
big quotables in our family. But so we did watch stuff that was, let's say, a little more blue, or had some colorful language, but I don't ever remember watching Anchorman. What I associate it with is like boys, other people I was in middle school with, just quoting it incessantly, and so I just hated it. I didn't actually see it until I was probably like in my like late 20s.
Okay.
At which point I thought it was funny, but so much of it had permeated the cultural consciousness that it just like wasn't
the
funny
humor was
to
watered
me.
down because you'd heard a million idiots say all the lines.
So family loves Talladega Nights.
I was that boy, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. I'm sure if you are a man and you are listening to this and you were between the ages of 11 and 18 in 2004, you were probably that boy.
Can I tell you?
So just know you ruined the movie for me. No, I'm just kidding.
My favorite time that a friend of mine quoted it. It's not even a good quote. Like, this part was funny. It's a Paul Rudd line. Okay. And it is the part where, like, if you remember in Anchorman, like a panda is going to give birth, and that's kind of like a big story. And Paul Rudd, every time that it cuts to him and he's doing the panda story, he goes, "Panda watch." And it was again at church. I was 16, and a friend of mine, and we were getting chastised for during youth group or whatever, not stop quoting Anchorman, like dumb shit, like all the dumb lines from Anchorman. And we got onto several times, and finally we piped down, and it got very quiet. And then a friend of mine named Daniel, in just an absolute moment of quiet, just goes, "Panda watch," and it killed me, and I still laugh about it.
I will say, like, the one series of jokes that got me, like, no matter how many times someone had said it when I watched it for the first time, and I've seen it a couple of times since then, but is like the I Love Lamp.
Oh yeah. Steve
Like,
Carell is great.
Steve Carell, like, Steve Carell is a great performer, and Adam McKay, they're just like doing a dual, you know, a not solo exactly. I'm mixing my metaphors here, but like they are just shredding together.
Yeah,
you know, like the two of them are perfectly in harmony.
An overused internet cliche. They all understood the assignment.
Yes, they understand each other's assignments, right? Step Brothers, I think is the first one of those that I saw in theaters, maybe, and I do think it's very funny. But I don't often revisit it. Like, I don't feel a drive to be pulled back to it. But I also, as a teenager, was very, very self-serious.
Yeah.
And I really did not like stupid humor.
Okay.
And now I still am not a huge cringe humor person, but I can get silly with it. And I think some of my perspective on his films, in the absence of a strong family connection, are just colored by me at age 16 being like, this is dumb.
That's totally understandable.
This is so dumb, you guys.
I was 16 when Anchorman came out and 18 when Talladega Nights came out. So like I was the boy quoting all that shit, but I also like quickly grew tired of like the quoting, and I also see like the watered down humor when you watch it now and you like, oh, that's the thing that all these idiots have been saying or whatever.
That's what they said.
Yeah.
It's like if you're watching a horror movie and right before jump scares happen, like maybe 5 to 10 seconds, someone was like, a jump scare's about to happen. Right? Right? But it's like years of that. Adam McKay seems to really stir up that kind of response and commitment
for sure.
to his work
and
among
another
young men.
Adam McKay thing that I think I didn't mention here, but I think we should touch on before we get to these movies, is that him and Will Ferrell were also the creators of Funny or Die, like a very influential internet comedy sketch thing. I don't know what do we call Funny or Die. It's a website, but it had like sketches on it, and it was kind of doing something different before. I feel like it kind of built a template for like online.
Presaged
right.
What came later, and this kind of relates to something that I'll say later on, but I think there's like a very specific kind of mid 2000s or 2000 teens, like early 2000s and 2000 teens, of this kind of like cracked sentiment, this kind of Funny or Die sentiment, this very specific style of humor that really is crystallized and finds its like most intense expression in McKay's films, that they were really kind of on the, I don't know if they were on the cutting edge of it, or it was the most clear expression of it, but at the time it was kind of operating as a separate website, as opposed to now where I would say it's kind of cultural equivalents, or like people are doing that 2020s version on YouTube, or they're doing it on TikTok, and instead Funny or Die was like its own little universe. So 14 episodes in, y'all, we're going to try something a little novel. Instead of just focusing on one movie today, we're going to focus on 3 different films. Adam McKay's kind of class clown come blowhard liberal trilogy, 2015's The Big Short, 2018's Vice, and 2021's Don't Look Up. We're going to orient the discussion of each movie around some shared prompts, moving chronologically, starting with The Big Short, and then we're going to dig into some themes that kind of run across all of them, do some synthesizing. So, Craig, you want to start us with The Big Short? Yeah,
The Big Short is the first film in Adam McKay's informal trilogy here that we're going to dub the liberal savior trilogy of Adam McKay. It was released in 2015. The Big Short begins 2 years before the 2008 financial crisis, where a small group of bankers were the only ones to notice that the U.S. mortgage system had created a volatile bubble that was on the brink of bursting and would eventually burst and tank the global economy. So The Big Short is, kind of explaining how we got to the 2008 financial crisis, and in my opinion, does it pretty good. Like, I like this movie. I wouldn't say it's like a favorite or anything, but I like it. I had a good time watching it again. It definitely does a good job of explaining some really, really complicated things in a kind of fun and energetic way. Okay, well, what about you? How do you like The Big Short?
This is definitely my favorite of the 3.
Mine too, yeah.
I think it's also the most rewatchable. In that, like, there are many different threads that can be picked up. And there's many different tones that the movie is navigating. I mean, I guess that's kind of a marked thing about this trilogy as a whole, is that McKay is trying to operate on several registers simultaneously, and I guess I just think that this one is the most successful in doing that. But it's definitely the movie that I like the most, and that I think does the best job of straddling the line between being funny and communicating complex information and giving like due deference to the significant and like sorrowful topic that it's covering.
Yeah. It's definitely the funniest, I would say, mostly because Don't Look Up, I don't think has any jokes.
Yeah.
There's like, it's purportedly a comedy, but I don't think there's like a single like crafted joke in Don't Look Up. But yeah, the dialogue is like really snappy and witty, and it does a pretty good job of explaining like complicated stuff. I will say, like, my issue with it is that I don't really like any of the characters. Like, I am at like kind of a arm's length from everyone in this movie, because like, even though they're the good guys of the story, I'm like, well, they're still assholes.
See, I'm so glad you brought this up, because the thing that I struggle with most in this movie, and I mean, I think a lot of people have obviously relationships to at least anyone that was alive at the time and politically cognizant, has a relationship to the 2008 financial crisis. But like, as someone who lived through that in Southwest Florida, and if you don't know why that's notable, the literal city that I lived in, Cape Coral, Fort Myers area, had the highest rate of foreclosures for the entire country in 2008. Is that the movie is entirely driven by and focused on the people who were betting on the market to fail and profiting from those evaluations. Now, I know they weren't calling out for it to stop on the basis of it being like unethical that these kinds of these packages were happening with the the combining of like debt obligation, the collateral, with having no collateral behind these debts. They're calling it out because it's like unstable and therefore bad for them. And also, like, to be fair, they couldn't really stop it even if they had tried, right? This is something that had been happening for decades. But by making them the protagonists, like, it almost, I feel like McKay is intending to imply on some level, in order to engender like sympathy with them, that they're calling it out, or that they're that the stars of the movie have identified this problem because of altruism instead of profit.
Right. Yeah.
And there's, some scenes where like Brad Pitt's character, who, again, all these people are real people, is like taking the character of Charlie and Jamie to task over doing this, but ultimately he's still advising them and they still make a killing on it.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's just a very odd choice here by like situating them as the protagonists, but ultimately these are all people that made a lot of money on the horrible things that happen.
And I think a slightly better, and again, I do like the movie, but I think a slightly better version of the movie would be, I think, the like main protagonist. Who do you think the movie thinks the main protagonist is? That's my question first.
Christian Bale.
Me too. Yeah. I think a better version would be
Michael Burry.
Dr. Michael Burry. Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, he's an MD? Is that what I learned?
Yes.
I didn't realize that upon the first. I thought he was like a professor of economics.
Right. They barely talk about it, and it's actually like Mike, again, like for that's my husband. Is the person who on this viewing even brought that to my attention, because I had missed it in previous viewings.
Doctor of economics somehow, but yeah.
Nope, he was just a medical doctor who like had a lot of money for family reasons, I think, and
just a smart,
liked
numbers
data.
Guy. Yeah. I think Steve Carell's character should have been the like main protagonist, because he's the one that really wrestles with like the moral implications of what they're doing and like what's happening, and he's the one that has like, a tragic backstory that creates a little bit of character. He's also, I know this is something we're going to talk about as our favorite performances, but like, he is my favorite performance in the movie. He's like really funny. He's a very specific kind of neurotic person. He's doing a voice that I don't quite know what the voice is, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, I think I agree. I quite like his performance. I think it has I like Steve Carell as a performer and an actor.
Yeah,
I think that sometimes some of his performances can feel a little bit like they're all in the same family tree.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
they're just different iterations of kind of the same primary trunk, right? And I think this is one that feels very different. There's like a voice. He holds his face in a different way. There's a physicality. He's like frenetic in a way that usually he is not kind of embodying this like neurotic, anxious energy.
Yeah, he is neurotic, but neurotic in a different way than he like normally is, and like then. Because that character is definitely like a neurotic weirdo, but not in the. Not the
what I
Steve
was just
Carell
describing
brand.
is how I feel like this role is.
Oh, about the character. Gotcha.
Yes,
gotcha,
about
gotcha.
this specific character. Whereas I think, sometimes a lot of his other, especially his more comedic stuff, is like maybe neurotic, but it's kind of like big dummy energy.
Yeah, he's doing Michael Scott in various degrees in a lot of movies, which is great because I think Michael Scott's funny.
Yeah, just many different scoops and flavors of Michael Scott, and this is very much not a Michael Scott character. I do think I will say I quite like Christian Bale's performance in this movie. Now I don't think that the character is sympathetic in any way, but I think that he captures very well the data nerd who is totally disengaged from like the real life implications of that data and and its consequences. But I think that that's probably why this trade-off happened. I mean, one, just from selling a big movie perspective, I imagine that studios want to be able to say like this is riding on performance, right? That there are big stars that are centered and that people will be able to like, that's the big takeaway when they walk away from this movie is like, you should go see it because Christian Bale is great in it,
right,
or because Steve Carell is great in it, whatever. But I imagine that like that's part of why that trade-off happened, is that the performances were centered rather than like what's the overall message that we're taking away from this,
What did you think of Ryan Gosling?
The hair is a little distracting.
It is weird
to me.
What is going on with it? It's colored.
It looks badly
dark.
dyed.
Yeah,
it looks badly dyed and also
usual.
like curled. I can't imagine
There's
that
not
they
a lot of
permed
structure
it.
happening with it. Like it's like grew it out and kind of blew it out a little bit. It is a weird hair. He looks like he's doing like a 1980s parody of what Wall Street was.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like you need to
I agree.
update the look.
It's a little
bit.
Sheen. Yeah, it's a little Sheen-esque. I do like him being positioned as smarmier relative to the other people that are often, talking to the audience or that are centered in the narrative, because I think it cuts through, like when you're delivering information, breaking the fourth wall directly to the audience, and you're being really didactic, it not coming off as like a grade school PSA. One way of undercutting that is by having the person do it be sarcastic,
which is going to be the exact problem I have with the other movies.
Agreed.
Is that, like, this movie needs to be condescending because it is complicated and it needs to like, and it has a tone of like, listen up, dummy, we're going to explain this to you, because that is the vibe of the movie. And I think Adam McKay confuses himself on like what that narrative like device is for, and then tries to do it in the next two movies, and it just comes off. Well, first off, he tries it a couple times and don't look up, and like really like the fourth wall break, like really just limp. Like he does it a few times, and it's like, why even do it if it's only like.
So to me, it works in this movie because this movie needs footnotes.
Yes.
This crisis needs footnotes.
Whereas the other
for
two...
the average people, or for the average person, or maybe not even the average person, maybe somebody who's particularly informed, but like finance is something that's very complex to understand.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that tone is trivializing in other topics
Which
when
is
it's
weird
applied to
because
other topics.
he seems to recognize that the breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience is a little condescending. And that's why we have Margot Robbie in a bathtub and like Selena Gomez like explaining it to you, because he's basically saying like, okay, this is kind of boring and like, but you need to know it, so let me make it like zhuzh it up a little bit. Whereas like in the other movies, it just comes off as only condescending and not at all like, it just comes off like, all right, dummies. Whereas I do not like it in the other movies at all.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about some of the stuff in Vice, right, is like, American people are transparently lied to.
Right.
With stuff going on with the mortgage crisis, even a very informed person doesn't understand still as a baseline what mortgage-backed securities are. Yeah. Right? Or what it means to make a bet on a bet, or what subprime means. Yeah. So I think that, again, kind of that, like, the tone makes sense to kind of sweeten the delivery of information so that it doesn't feel like you're sitting through a high school class video.
Right. Yeah.
But in Vice, we're talking about, millions of Iraqis being murdered, and so the tone
mostly
is poisoning.
Yeah.
Right.
And we'll get to it, but the device itself in Vice is stupid.
Yes,
I don't like it.
So,
but who was your favorite performance? And Christian Bale.
For me, it's Christian Bale. I think that his physicality again is like pretty different than what he does in other roles. It's one of the things I don't like about his performance in Vice is I can see shadows of other performances or the way he does his voice. There's times where I'm like, okay, Batman.
You can see the strings a little bit, like of him deciding this is a character choice or whatever.
Yes, and
I do like in Vice though, he talks almost exactly like an uncle that I have who's a little blowhardy, like the
grunting really fucking gets me.
See, I like that because I recognize, like, I was like, oh, that is because I know someone like that I'm like, I recognize that.
Oh, for sure it is like it is for sure a type of man.
Yeah.
It just feels a little bit more of an I don't mean obvious choice in terms of the selection of other choices. I mean, I see it being a choice in the performance.
He watched a 60 Minutes interview over and over again.
I'm watching Christian Bale making decisions about being Cheney rather than looking at it and going, I believe that's Cheney. The other thing I want to say about The Big Short before maybe we move into Vice is that I do think that this movie from kind of a Marxist perspective, right, solidly sprinting towards the left, I think this movie does a good job of revealing some things about how capital operates in a way that the other movies fail to really understand the operation of power. And and it does this in really subtle ways. So even like the opening epigraph for this movie, it says, the text says, "It's what you know for sure that just ain't so."
Yeah.
And it's a great punchy line to capture the contradiction inherent in capital's drive for continued accumulation, but it also speaks to the ideological structures that reinforce its dominion, by which I mean, the people at the very bottom who are taking the subprime mortgages. It speaks to their experience. They were betting on something that was wrong. They knew for sure that this would be fine, even though there was not the actual backing for it. But it also speaks to how the systems of capital don't care because they have to operate on the basis that the cliff will never exist. They just have to keep pushing and accumulating and increasing profits and increasing their bets and act as if there is no ledge to fall off of. So I just think like there's little bits and moments like this throughout the movie where, and I'm not even saying that Adam McKay means all of that, but just that I do think that there are little quips and moments and times in this movie where McKay is really revealing how dangerous the financialization of our markets are in a way that can have Marxist interpretations, even if that's not his primary ideological gloss.
Yeah. And I think and this might be a good segue for the next ones, is that I think why this movie is better is this movie is more prescriptive and is curious about why this happened, whereas the next two are solely interested in being descriptive, being like, this happened.
And then
the why,
this happened.
Yeah, the why we're not going to care about as much as just being like, here is the state of things. Whereas I feel like The Big Short is actually interested in like, why did this happen? Whereas, yeah, Vice is strictly just like, look at this guy. So do we want to move into Vice? All right, cool. So
take us there.
After 2015, we go to after the commercial and critical success of The Big Short, McKay took aim at one of the 21st century's greatest villains, Vice President Dick Cheney. The 2018 film Vice tells the kaleidoscopic life story of Dick Cheney from college party boy to one of the primary architects of the war in Iraq. What do you think in general, your overall?
I hate this movie.
I do too. I hate this movie.
So I've seen this movie twice.
Me too.
In 2018 in theaters.
Just the other day.
And last night. In 2018, when I saw this movie, I was angry when I left the theater, and I will just like never forget the one of the like smash cuts where it's Cheney fishing, and then it smash cuts to a bombing, and I can't remember. I think at that point it's Iraq. Maybe it's Afghanistan, but it's not the Cambodia one with Rumsfeld. But where I just felt like literally physically sick and nauseous about the total lack of humanity in the way that the coverage of, again, the death of millions of people inflicted by
not Dick Cheney's lack of humanity, which he definitely lacks humanity,
right? But
the
like
film's
the depiction and like the use of filmic language and its implications for artistic interpretation, were just like nauseating.
Yeah, again,
to me.
I think just gratuitously like incurious about the effects Dick Cheney had. Like, yeah, just the smash cuts of like, some Iraqis died because of what he did, but like, yeah, they did. Care to elaborate or like explain the gravity of the situation? No, we're just gonna like spend most of the time making him look like a boob.
Yeah, I think the Vice contrasts for me, because here's the thing, it's like I want to be careful about. I had a mentor in graduate school who, when I was working on reviews for journal articles, right, who told me some really great advice, which was, don't judge the article by something it's not trying to do, right? When you're writing a review, it's not, that's not good science. It's not like a good analytical framework. So I don't want to, like, it's not fair to Adam McKay, to the material, whatever, to watch Vice and go, well, why isn't this movie about like the Iraqi perspective? Yeah. Because there is something meaningful about how this happened, you know, internal to American systems. But I contrast this movie with something like In the Loop. Have you seen In the Loop? Yeah. You're a fan of Iannucci's work?
Yeah, Armando Iannucci. Yeah.
That movie covers, I mean, this movie, Vice covers a lot more time, but In the Loop covers, you know, leading up to, it ends with Colin Powell's speech to the UN. And that is a movie that is comedic. It is sardonic in tone.
Really funny,
yeah, it's very funny. But it's not bringing levity. It's using absurdity to contrast how like bureaucratic machinations produce horror.
Right.
That movie accomplishes that smoothly and without like undermining the humanity of the people who died. Yeah. And this movie totally fails to do that by trying to straddle. It's like trying to do too many things at once, almost, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh.
Gotta...
The Googs is talking to me.
I think also like what you were saying about the professor that you had, what he said, I think Roger Ebert had like,
check thyself before you wreck thyself.
What happened?
It was not a man who said that to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I legit thought you had said that. That's what I said.
I'm just teasing Craig.
Professor that that she said.
Yeah, woo, there we go.
Roger Ebert had a similar sentiment about movies that he said, don't judge the movie you wish you saw, judge the movie you saw. Which I think makes a lot of sense. And so my criticism would be like, okay, yeah, it's not about Iraq, but then don't pretend to care about it in these like very superficial ways that are just seem expedient for the plot and not anything you're actually interested in talking about.
Right. Or that, like, I feel like what's happening in this movie is that he goes, I'm making these juxtapositions to show how their lives are American politicians' lives are continuing to operate normally. They're relaxing, they're fishing, and look, there's death and destruction.
Right.
But the death and destruction is shown in like 3-second long clips.
Flashes almost.
Flashes. Yeah. So there's no like weight or severity to them.
Yeah.
And so I think he's trying to like have his cake and eat it too. Yeah. Basically.
Which I think is also a problem that The Big Short has, which we touched on, is like lacking the like human element, but it does have one really good scene, which is when he visits the Hamish Linklater character.
When bombs people go visit.
Yes. Yeah. And the family, and he tells them like, hey, have you talked to your landlord? Because he hasn't paid his mortgage in like 90 days. And you see the like, oh yeah, this isn't just going to affect property owners. This is going to have like a chain reaction. I think that's really good. I wish there was more of that stuff.
And the scene with the dancer, I don't think the scene with the dancer has quite the emotional weight as the previous scene, but there is still some like, these are people who are being affected by this.
And the scene with the dancer, I think, was really effective in pointing out how like just having a handful of cash but not a lot of like collateral or whatever will really get you, with the system that they set up, is really going to get you in trouble. Because that's basically what she says, is that she doesn't have like, if I remember, like she doesn't have good credit, she doesn't have a lot of collateral, she just works in a heavy cash industry, so she could like,
she could show up and lay down,
put up like throw down some cash, and then she had like what, 5 houses I think she says or something, and then we don't see her later, I don't believe, but presumably she has to foreclose on all of them.
Right.
But yeah, so yeah, Vice is a big thing that I hate about Vice is I don't like a movie that is clearly meant for me, if you know what I mean by that. You know, like, this is clearly a movie meant for like like-minded folks like us that hate Dick Cheney to be like, we're right to hate this guy. See, like, it is like, I feel like the movie should have a sign that says like, pat yourself on the back for watching this part because you're really doing a service. And I hate that. Like, it seems so, it's just not interested in giving any new information about Dick Cheney's character. It's just like a, it's just incurious.
Yeah, something that I'd like to discuss across all 3 movies, so I'll just foreshadow it a little, and we could talk about it more in a minute after we go through Don't Look Up, is how these 3 movies seem confused about who their audience is.
Oh my God, yes.
The Big Short, I would say, is the least confused, and goes for a broader audience. And I think Vice and Don't Look Up are very not clear about who they're trying to speak to.
Yeah.
And that's part of it in Vice is, you know, as someone who came to a political awareness under the Bush administration and is very politically aware and well-read, particularly in the realms of American history and American politics, there is no new information here for me. And understanding these dynamics, I think there are fewer barriers to entry than the financialization of markets. Yeah. For example. And I don't know that there are people who, or maybe there are, but were there people in 2018 who didn't recall the Bush administration and all of its terrors
if there were,
saw
they're not
this
watching
movie.
This movie.
That's what I mean. That went to go see this movie.
Yeah. No, I can't imagine there's people that like, oh, what? Who's this Dick Cheney now? Let's see this. Let's see this movie. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Or maybe the target is like liberals who had the general feeling that the Bush administration was bad and disagreed with it, but
I think it's
didn't know the finer points. It's a little unclear to me who this movie is for.
It's for like Donald Trump's version of liberals. Like it is for the libs. I feel like that is, he made a movie that was for the libs in the sense that like, here's one you can get behind, which is not challenging as a like, it's not a challenging viewing experience at all to be like, here's a movie that we made for you because we know you like these things or whatever. Yeah. And also, look, I'm glad that Dick Cheney like stood by his gay daughter's side and everything, but like, fuck that whole plot line. Like, you are the face of like the most anti-LGBT like party organization in America. Why are we giving these glowing, humanizing moments? Because they are kind of glowing. I don't know. The moments where like he decides I'm not going to comment on this is almost presented it to me in the movie like a shred of like, yeah, there's some decency in there.
So I am with you as the movie is progressing, but I think that the movie as a whole, like after we see those final scenes where he throws Mary under the bus with like a simple nod to Liz for her first rep campaign, that the overall assessment is like he is, I think the one kind of compelling argument that the movie is making that I think is helpful overall is that Cheney was a political player who viewed himself as a kingmaker,
right,
who moved fluidly in service of power regardless, right? Like kind of going back to that scene with Rumsfeld and the bombing of Cambodia when they're talking about the conversation that Kissinger is having with Nixon behind closed doors of like, what do we believe? And he just is cackling.
Yeah, I like that part.
Well, like there's smash cuts of a bombing, the bombing of Cambodia, that just embodies everything about Cheney's spirit. And so I think like across the entire film, when we see that last part, it's a reflection of that same characteristic.
Yeah.
But I agree in the first like few points of it, it's like, oh, this is his like good side, right? And it's like, no, this is how conservatives operate. It's the same as when they have fucking mistresses who like have unwanted pregnancies and they help fund abortions. Like it's what's fine for me is not fine for thee. And the moment that it questions the building of his political legacy, he's fine to throw Mary under the bus.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think not to say that you can't like humanize monsters in movies, because the one that I was thinking of, because that did come up to me when I had that reaction of like, why are we humanizing him? And I was like, well, you can. I think that's something that do. And a movie that came up to me is, have you seen I gotta pull up his name, Oliver Hirschbiegel's Downfall?
I don't think so.
Oh, it's really good. It's like 3 hours long, and it's the last 24 hours of Hitler's life in the bunker. Oh. Just like angry, mad, just like, and it is very humanizing of Hitler, but is not sympathetic to him. It is like a man who is realizing that everything he's fought for is coming crashing to an end, and you're watching him in his most like agonizing final 24 hours of like coming to terms that he's a failure and all this shit. And it's humanizing as fuck, but it doesn't make him look sympathetic at all. And like, so there is a way to do it, but not.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think like one can humanize without motivating, without motivating sympathy, because humans, it maybe one perspective on this is being able to psychologize someone, right? Like instead of viewing them as a black box,
right,
where you don't understand the internal decision-making mechanism, that instead you can comprehend the psychology of what is producing their actions, their thoughts and feelings. And that's humanization, right? To say like, you're not a monster that is acting with unknown motives,
right,
but rather saying like, I can see inside that black box and comprehend where things are coming from. Can definitely happen. But I don't really think we get that. The closest that we get to any insight into what's happening internally with him is via Lynn as a foil. So his wife.
Right. Kind of like presenting, are you sure? Like moments.
Right. The thing, like the scenes between the two of them are an opportunity to gain insight because she is compelling him in certain directions. And as his behavior shifts vis-a-vis the demands that she's making, we might have some insight into his motives.
Yeah. One part that I found really bizarre is them the movie just yada-ing his involvement with Halliburton.
Right.
Which I was like, okay, I that part was crazy to me. Like, that would be like making a Dick Cheney movie that doesn't talk about Halliburton is like making a biopic about Michael Jordan, but like only the baseball stuff. Or like, you're missing a really important part of like what motivated this person, what made this person. I thought that was crazy that like it's literally a part that says he went on to found, like, it's done as a joke at first because it's pretending like it's the end of the movie.
Right.
And it's like he founded Halliburton and spent there for a few years. And then later on, it's just like he decided to leave Halliburton and become vice president. And it's not really brought up like how influential Halliburton was and why we were in Iraq and Afghanistan to begin with.
They talk about it from the level of when FOIA requests are made later, that there are maps of Iraq.
Yeah, and they mention
that
like
Halliburton has
oil fields and stuff like that.
But
they pay lip service to it, but like, I don't know. To me, Halliburton is like the defining thing about Dick Cheney. Like, that is the thing that makes Dick Cheney, and like why everything he did was so awful, because it was just motivated by like greed and power. And I don't know, it just seemed really weird to kind of gloss over Halliburton. Yeah,
I think it speaks to a similar problem to what we raised under The Big Short, by The Big Short focusing on performances, is that there is a minimization of the systems of power, right? Because what's really important here is like the relationship between these business firms and how they influence geopolitics, and that Cheney is like one link in that chain.
Yeah.
But there's a whole concept in political science, or political sociologists talk about revolving directorates. And revolving directorates is the idea that people move fluidly between governmental roles that advise and or manage contracts and or regulate industry and roles in that industry. So like, you know, the people who are in charge of the FDA, oftentimes their next role after the FDA is Merck Pharmacy or Pfizer or whatever.
And he touches on that in The Big Short.
Yeah.
With the, was it Karen Gillan?
I think so.
Is the one that he's like, wait, you can go from working for the like regulating agency to one of the businesses that you were supposed to be regulating? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like, and that is like one of the primary ways that the ruling class like builds and reinforces shared interests, right? Is by just having this totally impenetrable or nearly impenetrable just like flow between the people who are supposed to be doing the limiting of power and the people who are exercising power, right? You know, who watches The Watchmen? The Watchmen are all holding hands together, right? And I think, you know, to your point, they, by focusing again like on the individual, Cheney's relationship with his kids and the policy decisions he's making, rather than like, him being in charge of Halliburton was like majorly influential in what caused this in the first place.
Yeah. And it just kind of glosses over it.
Yeah. Or that, connecting back to all the stuff we talked about with Thomas Green last episode about like the destabilization of the region in the first place, is like connected to decisions that the U.S. interference that the U.S. was undertaking in the 1980s, you know, in Iraq. And a lot of those bigger picture items are really missed here.
One other thing I want to talk about in this movie that I really, really hated, and I mentioned it before, is the whole movie is framed around a narrative device of this person played by Jesse Plemons is telling the story of Vice. And first off, they tease it a bunch of times, like, we'll get to who I am. And I'm like, okay, well, must be something interesting. And then who he is just a random, like, Joe Schmo who ended up being the guy. Is this part true? I bet this is like an invention for the movie. Like, do you know who? Anyways, Jesse Plemons plays the character who he dies in a car accident, and he is, when Dick Cheney needs a heart transplant, it's the Jesse Plemons narrator character whose heart he ends up getting. First off, why? I don't know. That really doesn't, like, why is that person the narrator?
It's also odd because I think the implication of the way it's constructed is that, like, Dick Cheney was not worthy of this man's heart, but we don't know jack shit about this man aside that
he's a dad.
He's like kind of like a working class.
He was in the war
guy. Like, I think he's trying to communicate, again, straddling that line between macro and micro, that like that Dick Cheney was a vampire on both macro and micro levels. But I think it's totally unnecessary and it clutters it. Like, I think you could just have, we've seen him drinking, we've seen him heavy eating, like, that he does not care about himself, and he is just, like, this hedonistic, just no constraints, gobbling up resources on all levels, that we don't need this other thread. It's just totally unnecessary.
And the movie, like, wants there to be gravity, but, like, literally every heart-related part of the movie is played for a laugh. Like, every time he has a heart attack,
he's like, "Hey guys, I'm having a heart attack again."
Yeah. But then when we get to the reveal, it's treated with, like, the utmost gravity, and I'm like, okay, well, we're kind of on two minds that this is, like, funny that he has heart problems, but now we have to really treat it seriously, and it's just a big old mess. Also, Jesse Plemons is, like, one of our premier weirdo actors, and to, like, put him in such a boring role, I was so bummed about. Like, I want Jesse Plemons.
I know, I love him.
Something weird and meaty to do, because he is great at being a weirdo.
Yeah, I think that the same impact could have been communicated of, again, furthering the idea that Dick Cheney is self-absorbed and has no ability to be invested in other people, of just simply having him say the thing that he said in real life of, it's not that person's old heart, it's mine. You could still have a scene of him saying that and leave out this whole, like, you're essentially introducing another narrator,
right,
for a very limited payoff that could have been achieved through him simply saying what he said,
and, like, condensed or whatever. But also, I think I've mentioned this before, but did you watch Friday Night Lights, the TV show?
I did not.
Jesse Plemons is in that. He's not being too weird in that, but he's a little. That was, like, kind of the thing that I think made him pop off, was, like, he was probably like a D-level character in Friday Night Lights in the early seasons, and by the end he's, like, a bit more of the heart of the show. But one thing that I love is he is a Christian youth group boy in it, but he also wants to be a bit of a rocker, and he has a Christian rock band called Crucifixtorious in Friday Night Lights, which is awesome.
That's some good naming. I hope whatever specific writer came up with that is
so good.
Well, I'm sure. Hopefully they're on strike right now. Hopefully they agree and they're not a scab. But I hope that they're doing well. You know. So why don't we move on to Don't Look Up so that we can get to our kind of talking across them. Yeah.
So Don't Look Up, our third in Adam McKay's Liberal Savior trilogy. It is his most recent. Don't Look Up is a satire aimed at America's general indifference in the face of global crises. Read global warming and or the response to COVID seems to be the, like, two motivating satirical targets in this movie. Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence play astronomers who discover a 10-kilometer wide comet headed directly for Earth, which would cause an extinction-level event. Alarmed, the scientists parade this urgent information to aggressively apathetic politicians, influencers, and tastemakers whose myopic views on the crisis is only making things worse. How do we like this one?
I don't care for it.
I hate this one more than Vice, honestly.
I think I am... How do I weigh this? Vice, the content of it is upsetting to me. Like, the way the filmic technique intersects with the content produces, like, a negative reaction for me. Yeah. But I think is, like, a finely made movie if you don't care about Iraqis.
Right, yeah.
This is a bad movie.
Oh my God.
In my opinion.
It's a lot of the issues we've had with the first two movies, I feel like
are all magnified.
Yes,
yeah. It feels like he's lost his, like, joie de vivre or something. Yes. Like that a spirit of joy that maybe inappropriately, is injected in his other movies is just lost to the wild winds here.
Yeah. I the whole time I was watching this, I was comparing it to my feelings of like Adam McKay's career culminating in Don't Look Up. It seems very similar to me to the way I've looked at Jon Stewart's run as like the Daily Show host. Point. Is that like starting off kind of acerbic and biting and having something to say, and by the end of it, we are not making jokes. We are just holding court and like preaching, and like there is nothing for me in that. Like, okay, a bunch of stuff I already believe, you're just gonna preach it at me and not really do it in a creative way, in an interesting way, in a funny way. You're just gonna be like, sit down and I got something to tell you here, kid.
This is his rally to restore sanity.
Yeah. Just without Stephen Colbert doing like the funny parts of it.
Yes, I forgive Stephen Colbert for his participation in that like, stupid finger wagging in both directions.
I mean,
event.
Stephen Colbert, like, even though that event was stupid, like his little bit in it was still funny. Like he's still coming out doing his character of like back when he was like a Bill O'Reilly type character. Right. Like that part's still funny, but like, yeah, that whole thing sucked. And yeah, this Don't Look Up is kind of that.
Yeah, it's more, Don't Look Up is more pointed in a very specific direction, but I just mean in terms of, like you were saying, kind of that culmination of losing the plot a little bit. I don't mean the plot of the movie, but, in a, in the idiom sense
of what you're here to do.
Yes, losing, like your motivation just getting so squishy that it can't hold the weight of like your actions.
It was the like movie equivalent of when all those celebrities sang Imagine at the beginning of COVID. And actually like half of the people in that Imagine video are in this movie.
Great point. This is the sequel.
Yeah. But goddamn, it's just so tedious. The characters are wholly unlikable. Even our two like protagonists are annoying. Like I don't know.
think there's something in that I kind of respect about the choices, because I do think one of the overarching messages of the movie, which is true about people doing climate activism, is like, this is doom. We should all feel a sense of doom.
Right.
And yet people are screaming at the top of their lungs. They're chaining themselves to buildings. They're lighting themselves on fire. They're self-immolating, and no one is doing fucking cares or is doing anything. And so I understand where that is coming from because it does kind of reflect what that activism looks like, or the relationship of that activism to like the broader media discourse. But it just doesn't make for a great watch. It's like what we were talking about the previous two movies, where it's like you're sacrificing the meaning of the movie for performance. This movie kind of is like doing an inversion of that. I guess like we need a happy medium. We need a
find something.
Yeah.
And also satire, like, to be good needs to be specific. I feel like and this is all the like people they're making fun of are so broadly painted that I'm like, what is the point that we're making here? I'm trying to think of like, I don't know, like Dr. Strangelove, like those characters, like the Peter Sellers characters are all oddly specific to the point that like you can attach, like you can create a satire from that. And this, I'm like, who are we making fun of? I don't understand what. First off, like, why is Ariana Grande just not Ariana Grande in this movie? Like give some specificity to it so we understand like what's being lampooned or something, because she's essentially Ariana Grande, just not.
Yeah, I think
I don't know why I hung on to that so much, but
it's well, I want to go into the favorite performance, because I would say that for me the most specific satire that's happening are some of your favorite performances.
Oh, me specifically, you mean?
What you have listed here as your favorite performances are like the most specific points of the satire where you're like, I know who these people are supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
so
like, the big problem with the Meryl Streep character is we don't understand it all. Like, I don't think they ever name if she's a Democrat or a Republican. We don't really understand what like policy position she has, how the decisions that she makes in the movie fit into like the larger spectrum of like what she believes and how she runs the country. Like all of that is missing. Whereas the performances that I really like are Jonah Hill as her son, who is very much like a Don Jr., Ivanka, like nepotism baby that works in the White House because he's the president's son, and he's really funny in it. And then Cate Blanchett as like basically Minka Brzezinski from Morning Joe is like the kind of glad handing, pretending everything is fine, but secretly knowing that everything's not fine, but not really caring because you're doing okay.
The people that know that they're cogs in the wheel and are happy to continue being cogs in the wheel so long as like their status quo is not disrupted.
Right. Yeah. And that stuff I thought was pretty good, but like a lot of the other performances are just like, who are you doing? Who are you supposed to be? Why is this even happening? Wasted performances from Ron Perlman, which could have been really funny, but then he just goes away. I like that bit that he was like this gung-ho guy and then he's just gone for the rest of the movie. Timothy Chalamet, I don't even know if they knew what they're doing.
Oh, I love Timothy Chalamet. I'm not saying it's a great performance and where I'm like, wow, great acting, but it's just...
I don't think his performance is bad. I just don't know what are we saying with this character. I don't know, like, why... I think it was a reason to have Timothy Chalamet in the movie.
That's fair.
But I just didn't understand, like... I don't know. Maybe it's that I wish they did more with the character and like fleshed out their weird like little romance a little bit more. That would have been more interesting. But as it was just like, all right, Timothy Chalamet's here now to kind of throw in little like one-liners or whatever.
Yeah, maybe I just appreciate like seeing old Timmy being just like a scumbag, which is not like a tenor that we get from him very frequently. So I do like his performance in it.
And because it was a little bit it was basically his character from like Lady Bird, just not quite as big of an asshole. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, is there kind of like an essential scene from this movie for you?
Yeah, I really like, and I think it's actually well done, is the like finale when the like comet hits and the world is ending and like everything slows down, and at this point like our central characters have come together around a dinner table who all know that like today's the day the world is ending and are having like kind of a nice peaceful quiet dinner. And then when the comet hits, like everything goes in slow-mo and we see the dinner kind of explode. I thought that was like a cool moment, and there's like interesting choices being made, and that was a cool scene.
Yeah, I agree. It is... I don't want to say it's worth watching the movie for this scene, but it is the scene that makes me go like, wow, I don't feel like this movie was a total waste of my time. I found that scene maybe more so the very first time I saw it, but to be quite emotionally impactful. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's one of the ways in which the movie is effective, which is that part of what makes climate activism and climate justice so hard to communicate to people is that because it is a long game, that it's hard to make it immediately
the threats
real.
Are amorphous.
Right, they're amorphous and also like projected into the future with some like indeterminacy. And I think that it is puts a really fine point on like exactly what this means. And the movie is encouraging the viewer to imagine yourself in that situation. What if you were sitting at a table with all the people that you cared about at the end of the world, and it's inescapable? There is no other option for you except to be present with those people. Yeah. So I felt that that one scene, I was like, damn, damn McKay, cool. Where you kind of feel the full sense of the gravity of the problem on both these micro and macro registers,
I just accidentally closed out of the Google Doc.
No problem. So,
can I talk about one more thing in this movie?
Yes, bring it on.
What the fuck is Mark Rylance doing?
Mark Rylance is a weird motherfucker.
I don't think I like him very much.
No?
Like, I've liked him in stuff, but like, okay, this performance is the exact same performance that he does in Ready Player One.
Okay.
Which I also hate, which like, all right. He is doing, I've used this phrase to describe what John Travolta is doing in the movie, what is that movie called that I love? The one that the Fred Durst movie that he did.
Oh.
The Fanatic?
Yeah.
But Mark Rylance is doing like autism face, and he's doing that in this, and he's doing it in Ready Player One, and seems really, I don't know. I don't want to be the soy boy lib cuck who's getting offended by everything, but like he is doing like a autistic thing. I think he's like, let me be neuroatypical in a weird, obvious way that seems like a caricature. And like I don't know. There's something really off-putting about his performance in this. It's also stupid. Like, I think his performance is stupid, but like what he is doing specifically seems like he's doing like a neuroatypical face.
Have you seen Bones and All?
I haven't. Is he in that?
Yes, he
Oh,
is. His role is very, very odd. I think it's like effective, but it's very menacing and odd. So I'm just curious. If you watch, I'd be curious to hear what your perception of his performance is there. I really love the book or novella and movie Angels and Insects, which he stars in.
Okay.
But I agree. I don't love his performance in this movie. I have not seen Ready Player One, but I do think there are movies where he delivers, and obviously he has a long storied career.
Yeah. And
but I would say maybe more of like his prestige dramas might be more the zone than like his broader pop culture roles.
And I think this movie and Ready Player One are maybe not entirely like. I think maybe he's trying. All right, here's my guess, is that he realizes these movies aren't up to snuff when he gets the script, and he's like, let me bring something interesting to these performances. And I don't think they're necessarily his, like this and Ready Player One, I don't think are necessarily his issue. I think it's a lack of like understanding of what the character is from like just the very like basic script level, and he's trying at least.
Maybe some of these, I don't know about this one specifically, but maybe some of these, probably Ready Player One, maybe are movies where he's not acting around other people, if you get my drift. Like maybe is on a green screen and is not in the same room as all the other people. Maybe some of that is happening. I would venture to guess might be a contributing factor, maybe in some cases.
Could be. But yeah, no, I do like Mark Rylance. I don't want to like completely shit on him. I realized I said I don't like him because I was thinking of these two movies. He's dope in Dunkirk. He's the like boat captain dad or whatever. Or no, not a captain. He's just a fucking guy with a boat. Right?
Yes, he's bringing
he's
where
like
all the
citizen.
people, all the civilians are bringing people over.
And he was good in that one Tom Hanks movie that he won an Oscar for, which I was slightly indifferent on. Do you remember it?
No. But I love
Bridge of Spies.
Oh yes,
He's
yes.
The,
so maybe he just needs to be in like prestige, kind of perverse dramas or World War II dramas. Like
not
those
fake prestige dramas.
Those
like,
are
don't
the
look
only
up
options.
in Ready Player One. Ready Player One never even pretended to be a prestige drama.
So let's get into some synthesizing across. Do you want to mark the time?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's get into some synthesizing across these three movies. We've definitely touched on some aspects that we wanted to hit here, but let's dig in just a little bit deeper. So McKay really has a distinct visual style and flair. You know, across these movies, we see collage style quick cuts. We see smash cuts, like in The Big Short at the very beginning. There's flashes of the 2008 crash. People are standing in the unemployment line. There's, scenes of eviction are happening. We see this in Vice, where things we've already mentioned, where the bombing of Cambodia is smash cut into Steve Carell as Rumsfeld laughing about them not having any ideological center. We also see a lot of breaking of the fourth wall. We see a lot of what I kind of think of as, no shade to cracked, but kind of a cracked 2000s distilled Gen X-y, like we don't care attitude, like at the beginning of Vice when they say like we did our fucking best about trying to uncover the truth here.
Yeah, that was annoying.
Yeah, so across these kind of this distinct visual style, how does McKay's approach kind of serve or belie his apparent aims, do you think?
I think, obviously it works the best in Big Short, and I think that's because he has something to say in The Big Short, whereas like Vice, that style just makes it seem like, do you remember that Chris Farley interview sketch he would do on SNL where he would have like famous people on, but the whole like bit was that he was a terrible interviewer and he would just be like, do you remember when you did this one thing? That was awesome. It was like, that is what Vice is like, remember when Dick Cheney did this? Smash cut to, remember when he did this? Like, there's nothing to say. It's just all like the style in service of nothing.
It's pointing. Like, it's just like pointing at it as opposed to
preaching, not teaching. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and it's annoying and condescending in the latter two movies, I feel. But it works in The Big Short.
I agree. And I mentioned this earlier, but this style was like actively upsetting to me when I first saw Vice. Maybe this time it was like a little cushioned by the knowledge that it was coming, whereas I obviously didn't know what to expect when watching it in the theater. But smashing together scenes of torture and abject destruction and death with like Cheney's family life and him fishing and like the Washington Quotidian feels like it really reduces this massive global impact of the Afghanistan and Iraq invasions and all of the resulting fuckery that came from it and is continuing to radiate from it to like these few fleeting moments that can just be tossed away by the next impending smash cut. And I understand that his intention is juxtaposition, but the actual like filmic technique choices that he's making here, I think are trivializing. So we know that McKay's movies in this vein, you know, from this kind of trilogy, have a real didactic quality to them. He's definitely intending to teach. You know, did you learn anything from any of these movies? And kind of taking a step back even further from McKay, what do you think about the capacity of narrative film to impart information?
Yeah, I definitely learned from The Big Short because I'm just your average dumb guy that like I get that there was a financial crisis, but I didn't understand a lot of the machinations of it. And The Big Short really is able to point out, like, in kind of dumb guy term, like not dumb guy terms, smart terms to a dumb guy in that delivery system to kind of like help me better understand that. But no, Vice and Don't Look Up, I learned nothing because there's nothing new. There's nothing interesting being said at all. Like, I don't know. I was trying to think of something like genuine, so I'm not just seeming like I'm shitting on both of these movies constantly. But literally, I don't know. I don't think there was anything to be learned from either of those movies. At least learned in the sense of like, what Adam McKay is wanting to teach, I guess.
Yeah. I see that.
Yeah.
I think The Big Short, like you said, The Big Short is successful in this regard. It really felt at the time like a cultural moment to me of like, you know, people were talking about it a lot. I think that's because Adam McKay's career up until that point, this kind of felt like a Trojan horse almost, like of, you know, prior to that point, you're getting these big, broad, silly comedies, and then so it's an opportunity to kind of sneak in. Like people are like, oh, I like McKay, you know, let me go see this. And it's like, oh, you're going to get the comedy, but you're going to get also pretty detailed information, a primer on this crisis. And the subject matter is so impenetrable. It's very hard to understand if you were to just go looking for that by yourself for the average person. I don't mean that as like an insult to the average person. I mean, like you said, this is challenging stuff. Vice, I think, is, as we kind of discussed a little earlier, is one of those things where it's like, if you know about Cheney, you know everything that's in this.
Yeah.
And if you don't know about Cheney or recall very little from the Bush administration, there is not the amount of detail that's in The Big Short in these breakdowns. Like you said, they mentioned he was the CEO of Halliburton and that there was this map, and then they moved the fuck on. He's devoting in The Big Short significant time to breaking down complex terms, and it just feels like a gloss over, or like there's a little sprinkling of the details around these dynamics and details in Vice.
I also resent in Vice that he is painted as the primary villain of the like war in Iraq, which certainly, but
he's one of them, yeah.
But it also downplays George. Like George Bush was an idiot. He was malleable. That's why they liked him. But he's still culpable. He still made decisions, and the movie presents him as being kind of almost completely ignorant to everything and just like completely malleable to Cheney, which is like, sure, I mean, that is partly why the Republican Party wanted to run him, but he still has like blood on his hands. He still made conscious decisions, and I feel like this movie is trying to kind of say like, he didn't, you know, he's evil because he is malleable, not because he is making these decisions himself, and I feel like, I don't know, this movie if I was George Bush watching this movie, I'd be like, all right, I like that.
Right.
Hey.
Yes, do focus
Hands
on
are a
my
little clean.
painting. You know, not that they reference his painting, but like
Right.
now, like that's my legacy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And again, it speaks to that lack of systems analysis because it's much easier to attribute outcomes to evil people than it is to the intentional functioning of a fucked up system, which is what was going on here. And again, we mentioned this at the very, very beginning briefly, but the fact that Karl Rove is in like 2 minutes of this movie
crazy.
is nonsense.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And I mean, maybe they just didn't want to get into like the extent to which there was harmony versus conflict between Rove and Chaney, which could be more of the story.
That sounds hella interesting. And,
right.
Like, seems like a better framing device to like, again, review the movie
wild.
you saw, not the one
Just
you
wild.
wish you saw,
right.
but like.
But just wild to me that Karl Rove is in literally that one scene and then they're just like, move on.
Do you remember when Stephen Colbert used to interview Karl Rove on the Colbert Report? It was just a ham, a whole honey-baked ham that he put a pair of glasses on. I like that recurring.
Maybe, maybe McKay could have borrowed it.
Yeah.
For this.
Honestly, that would have been... I would have loved the movie if it was just an actor with a ham on his head and glasses being Karl Rove.
Doing the accent. I will say the accent that actor was doing was kind of funny.
I don't even remember.
It was like it was softer than I would say like Karl Rove. It's definitely exaggerated. Yeah. Before we move on, I did want to say as far as Don't Look Up and like what could be learned from it, I don't feel like I'm the target audience for this movie. Mm-mm. And here's what I want to know. Like, are there people... I think there is a possibility that there are people who watched this movie because it was on Netflix. It came out on Netflix during a portion for many areas of the country when we're still in lockdown. Uh-huh. And they liked McKay's comedic work and they dig DiCaprio. And so, but they're otherwise like not engaged in political news media. Like, one, do those people exist? Maybe they do. And two, like, did they learn anything? That would be like my question, because that's the only people that I can imagine learning something from that movie. Now, I do think there's probably like a segment of like outrage liberals that did like it, and not because they learned anything, but enjoyed it.
Got nominated for Best Picture. Might have won. I'm gonna look it up, but yeah, it did really well, like critically for the most part. I mean, obviously we're detractors and whatnot.
Yeah, but I mean, like in terms of,
it has a 56% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I think it was very split because people didn't like the tone of it. Like they felt it was very preachy, which again gets down to like I do think on some level that's honestly reflects a challenge that climate activists face. But it feels like it's preaching to the choir, and it's not accessible to people because of its tone, to people that it would want to reach.
Right. I mean, that is a big problem with it, that the people that might be the ones they're parodying aren't gonna, or the people that like might need this parody are gonna be immediately turned off. Which, I mean, like, I don't know. I'm of two minds, because I don't know. Do we need to make art for morons? Like, I don't know. I don't think it's art's responsibility to guide idiots to like see the light or whatever. Like, art is personal, so like you're gonna have your own personal reaction to it. I don't think it's necessarily the movie's responsibility to guide morons to like common sense or whatever.
For sure. But
they're not going to be watching this, and if they do, they're going to immediately be
turned off by...
Because, and this is the thing we didn't touch on, but it drives me crazy, is all three of these movies, but definitely Don't Look Up is the worst offender, and then Vice is chastising average people for just enjoying like simple life pleasures. There's a run of that in this, where like in Don't Look Up, there's a bunch of like cuts of like, here's the shit that Americans are doing while they're not caring about this. And it's just like reality TV show, pop music. Like, are we not allowed to have simple pleasures in the Armageddon? And it is like almost chastising you for having these, like the average American just cares about this or whatever. It's like, you can care about two things. I don't know why I'm being made fun of for like whatever.
Yes, you can care about two things, and also like collective action is required around systems of power that are producing this problem. Like the average American watching reality TV, it is both true that that can be placating, right? But it's also true that that's not going to stop mass industrial farming that is a huge waste of water, right? Or that it's going to stop cajillionaires from taking private jets everywhere, which is a huge fuel expenditure, or massive shifts in use of fossil fuels across like someone watching reality TV maybe in the collective might have some impact on people's likeliness to engage in shared collective action, but it is not the primary driver of the problem. Right. And like, I agree. It has a big, you know what this movie has to me? Big Idiocracy vibes. And I fucking hate that movie. The only part of that movie I like is that they are using Gatorade to water their plants. That is a funny bit to me. And the rest of it I hate.
There are bits in Idiocracy that I like a lot. I like that Terry Crews is named President Hector Camacho, whatever the fuck it is. But like overall, yes, it does have the same like preachy, like you are a dummy for enjoying.
Everybody is stupid. Yeah. I'm the only person that's not stupid.
Yeah, and there's like a few people that like catch strays for no reason and don't look like. Why did Ludacris have to catch a stray? I was like, what the fuck? Ludacris made some cool tracks.
Yeah.
Was that Vice or Don't Look Up? I don't remember. It was one of the ones where they're smash cutting to like, wow, all this shit is happening.
It's Vice.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because it's Shake Your Moneymaker.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, it's The Big Short.
Is it The Big Short?
Yes, because it's when they're like contextualizing the early 2000s and just like the but I agree. Leave Ludacris alone. Ludacris is a national treasure. So let's go back to that like broader question though of like, do you think that narrative film like has the capacity to teach without being preachy, like outside of McKay?
Yeah, and actually I wanted to compare it to a movie that I watched recently that is also a global warming movie.
Love it.
Which is First Reformed, which I think it's an odd pairing, but like, yeah, that movie I think is more personal, more about like dealing with how you, the individual, respond to like cataclysmic events. But yeah, I do think it is a bit more, I definitely like, I don't know, that's a hard one. That might have been a bad example because I still like am tackling like what First Reformed is about. And I love First Reformed, but like how I feel about it and what it says to me personally. But it definitely says something. Like there is something to be said, and I also don't want to give away like what happens at the end of First Reformed. So I'm trying to talk. Have you seen it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to talk around it a little bit, but that is a movie. Like if you haven't seen First Reformed, it was our most recent.
Yeah.
No, there was.
Yeah, it was the most recent.
Was it?
Yeah, for June.
Yeah. All right. So I guess it was. It was our most recent Cap City Video Lounge First Friday movie, and it is Ethan Hawke plays like a minister at basically like a non-functioning church. It's like a historically a historical church, so his congregation is like 6 people, but he has to like keep the appearances of the church or whatever, and he is confronted by a climate activist who basically poses the question to him, what will God think of us when he sees what we've done to the planet? And it sends him into like a crisis of conscience. And yeah, I do think that like narrative movies can teach us how to like think and respond to these types of things. Yeah, sorry, I feel like that's not a fully fleshed out idea, but my answer would be yes.
I mean, I think the answer is yes, and here's a good example.
And my example would be like First Reformed is tackling similar subject matter, albeit in a completely different way. But yeah. What about you?
I do think so. My preference, which is kind of in the vein of what you said about First Reformed, is I really like when movies propel that through like their observation of something, of some phenomenon or setting, in a way that sparks inquiry and curiosity in me, as opposed to like telling me something in very straight facts form. So an example of this for me is one of my favorite movies of all time is The Devils, 1971. I
haven't seen it. I need to.
Oh my God. It is so good. Directed by Ken Russell. At first glance, it's a movie that's about like sexual repression. It's definitely a nun movie, which is why I saw it initially, because I like nun movies.
By the way, I've watched a nun movie that I believe you like since the last time we recorded.
Benedetta.
Yeah.
I fucking love that movie.
Yeah, it's really good. But I'm a dumb guy, and like the main takeaway that I had was like, God, it would suck to wipe your butt with straw.
I think that's a good takeaway.
It happens early in the movie where someone wipes their butt with straw, and I was like, God, that would suck.
So glad I did not live in a time where people had to shit in troughs next to each other and wipe their butts with straw. But you know, I saw that movie, like I said, initially because, you know, it was coming up on listicles and stuff when I'm looking for movies about nuns. The performances in it by Oliver Reed and Vanessa Redgrave are great. The production design is like vivid and striking and brilliant. It's done by Derek Jarman, who went on to become a director himself. But as you kind of like dig into the context, like about what it's about, really the movie is about, in the 17th century in France, there was a consolidation of power where basically all of these different like little cities and villages and towns were their own, were ruling themselves basically. And in 17th century France, there was an attempt to consolidate power and basically go into these towns or villages and say, like, you have to knock down your walls and we rule you, not each of you ruling yourselves, kind of a thing. And it uses possessions / witchcraft, kind of depending on your read on it, to justify usurping local control.
Okay.
So there's like this lovely, not lovely in that it's good, but lovely in that it's ripe to dig into.
Yeah, the craft.
The craft is lovely. Like really interesting historical context that you can learn about if you watch this movie and investigate beyond its, you know, the walls around just the film. And so this is not a movie that like taught me these things explicitly, though definitely it is part of the narrative. But because I was curious after watching it, like to what extent this was fictionalized for the film. Obviously there's a lot of stuff in this movie. I will say, if you go to investigate this movie, it is quite salacious. And quite hard to get a hold of because there is no Region 1 DVD for it. But like that's my favorite kind of teaching that a movie can do, is when you just go, ooh, I gotta know more about what's happening here than like them telling me, going narration in 16th, you know, the 1600s in rural France.
Hey, I'm Jesse Plemons. Let me tell you about this. 17th century.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of personal preference. Now let's push it farther left. You know, from your perspective, Craig, what are the limits of the liberal perspectives in these films? You know, what is McKay missing on the 2008 financial crisis, on Cheney, on the climate crisis? And really what I'm trying to get at here is, do the failures in each of these movies have some shared essential quality across substantive content, that is attributable to the fact that McKay adopts a liberal as opposed to a leftist framework?
Oh God, that's a hard one. I think it might just be that, like, to me, liberalism as opposed to leftism is still steeped in the status quo of American politics, and still thinking of like politics as a game, which I think manifests itself in these movies. And something we've already touched on is a lack of like human portrayal, like average Joe, like. I think that might be the big one. It still feels to me he is American politics is team sports, and it shouldn't be. And to me, liberals are still in the team sport mind frame. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? Like, he is still, to me, get down to it, like, I think he's still interested in preserving the status quo of you know, when whoever that was, Biden, I think, said like, I want a strong Republican opponent or whatever. Like, the liberalism is still interested in this like never existing version of America where we have like two teams that both want the best and are still like, no, it's politics is what you're interested in, and there is a lack of human there's a lack of humanism in that, and I think that's kind of what all three of these movies are missing, is that like human element. How does it affect, like, I think it's kind of back to what you said about like glossing over the deaths of Iraqis. There's a lack of like the human effects of this, and The Big Short does the best job at it through, I think, the Steve Carell character kind of moralizing what happens, and then the one really brief scene we get of the dad that learns that like, oh shit, I might get evicted because my landlord hasn't been paying his mortgage or whatever. But I think those are two things that the other two movies are just wholly lacking, is like a human perspective. I don't know, I feel like I talked in circles without necessarily answering the question, but
no, I agree. I think this relates to my feeling, is that there's totally, especially first two films, totally lack a role for the people. Like, there's no clear like what can be done about this. And not, again, a movie does not have to, it does not have to resolve the questions that it proposes.
Oh yeah, I would prefer it didn't.
Yes,
a lot of the
and
times.
it doesn't have to wrap everything in a bow, but just in terms of like, if these movies conceive of politics as a team sport, the people, by which I mean from a Marxist perspective, like working class, the proletariat, are not on the field at all.
Right.
And it's not because McKay explicitly is making clear that they're excluded by nature of how the system is designed, but because it seems like that it's simply not of interest.
Yes.
To him.
Which is, I didn't want to put this on him, but we're there a little bit, so I'll say it because this is strictly conjecture, but like, from Vice, I get, okay, McKay is still a capitalist. And like, and I think maybe that explains very clearly why we glossed over the Halliburton part so much, is that like, yeah, he's still a capitalist at the end of the day. And
well, because liberals are right, like that's the defining feature of liberalism, as opposed to a Marxist perspective.
Capitalism's great, we just got to do it the right way,
right? That the capitalism is simply not operating in the perfect way. And it's like, if we understand the means of production and various collectivities, by which I mean groups of people that have shared interest and shared social and economic positions, relationships to those means of productions, we would come out with a much different perspective on what's possible in terms of climate change, what's possible in terms of geopolitical warfare, and also what's possible in terms of the financialization of markets and how we provide for people's basic needs, security, like access to housing. And again, those groups of people that are impacted are not even on the field. right, at all. In most of all of these movies.
Yeah. One other thing. Did you have anything else on the...
Oh, I would just say, I think that there's a version of these movies where McKay has read a book that I love, that I encourage everyone listening to this to read, called
BFG.
Who Rules...
This is what I can think of because of fucking Mark Rylance. Isn't he the PFG in the movie version?
Yes.
All right, sorry.
No problem. Called Who Rules America?
Okay.
By a political sociologist named Domhoff, Domhoff, that is about how class interests form and are consolidated in America, but you know, it has implications beyond that, but he focuses on an American context that kind of is infused with a Marxist spirit, that just like, I would love for there to be like connecting the dots a little bit more across the individual people occupying any particular role at a time. So this is, again, not just about Cheney. It's not just about the individual politician, you know, Meryl Streep in Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
It's about like, why are people's actions compelled in certain directions based on their positionality in the nexus of our social, political, and economic institutions.
Yeah.
And those are not easy things to grapple with using the particular tools and vocabulary that filmic language offers. But I would really like for more people to push themselves to try and explore that.
Yeah.
You know, but I agree. I think McKay is a capitalist, and that's the problem. A capitalist isn't going to make a Marxist movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. One thing that I thought of while we were talking, and I don't know, maybe this isn't as interesting to you as it is to me, but I was realizing these three are the first and only movies that McKay did without Will Ferrell. I don't know if there's anything interesting there, but I don't know. Maybe like to me, like, Will Ferrell brings a level of like absurd humanity to some of these movies that not to say that like Anchorman is like a humanist movie or anything, but it feels more like warm and real, and like, actually I would say it's more of a humanist movie than any of these three movies because it feels like real people and real characters, and like I don't know, to me. Also, do you know that they've had like a real life breakup as well?
Yes, I do. Well, I think it's a hard thing given that even I know there was some like a little bit more in-depth reporting about that maybe a couple years ago or last year. I think it had to deal with that Lakers thing that their production company did for HBO or Max because or whatever. I believe, I might have this wrong, but I believe that in early talks, Will Ferrell was meant to play Jerry Buss, the lead, and because Adam McKay was like the director and had creative control, he recast the role with John C. Reilly without first like talking to Will Ferrell about it, and it caused some bad blood, and now I think they just don't speak. Yeah, they don't speak. I think it was Rolling Stone. I can't remember who again did some in-depth reporting that kind of revealed some of that stuff. So it's hard to say because maybe part of what's happening in these movies is that McKay has always had interest in making films that are adopting that liberal savior perspective, and Will Ferrell was totally uninterested in that mode of communication, and that's what kept him from doing it previously. You know, so it's hard to say. I think that there are things about these movies that are beneficial and have probably been helpful in communicating complex ideas to people that maybe would not have otherwise been exposed to them. But the lack of systems analysis and the focus on individual contributors to these problems, I think, clouds real understanding of exactly what is going on. Yeah, agree. Because in my version of The Big Short, all of our protagonists are as big of a problem. Right, as the antagonist. Yes, as the antagonist, because they're ultimately not exclusively but overwhelmingly men pushing for the financialization of markets, pushing for continued accumulation despite human cost, expropriating the surplus value of proletarian people. Yeah, they're still in the same game as everyone else. They just happen to realize something that no one else did. Like, they're not a whole, like, there's one scene in it with what's that guy from New Girl that's really funny? Oh yes, it's him and the blonde guy who's in Ingrid Goes West. Yeah, where they're mortgage underwriters. Yeah, Billy Magnuson. They're underwriters. Kato Kaelin. Max, is that the other guy's name? First name? Yeah, Max it is something. Max. Fuck. Yeah, but they're mortgage underwriters, and they're just talking about, oh, who cares? We don't do income verification. We, you know, and the Mark Baum, Steve Carell's character, and all of his guys are just looking like we're so disgusted by what they're doing. Like, but again, kind of these men are making money based on that. Essentially, this is a fact-finding mission for them to improve their bet. It's just like the difference between those guys and the heroes is the heroes aren't as douchey about it. Flip the table. Stop playing at the poker table. Flip it. Yeah. So you want to transition to our favorite bit? Yes, which should be pretty easy, I think. But did Armond White like these movies? First off, I'm not gonna look at the notes so we can play the game. So, Big Short. What do you think? I think that he probably liked the filmmaking approach, but did not like the content. Yeah, almost exactly. He thinks it has great energy, but he thinks it's anti-business. Sure. He says, McKay's outburst echoes his picture's point. Blame Wall Street first. His anti-business perspective is no huge surprise, which is a huge self-report on Armond that thinks that holding the banks accountable is being anti-business. Or again, also buying into the weird construction of the movie where all the people making the bets are somehow like totally outside the system. Now, I understand they were outliers, but they're not outside the system. These are men who are making financial bets anyway. Right. Yeah. Like, he also has like a few weird lines in there where he like kind of like, and why don't we blame the American consumers at least a little bit for making these purchases? Like, he mentions the like stripper scene where he's like, people just made bad purchases or whatever. And it's like,
all right, you're victim blaming now. I feel like they're operating in a system that is propped up by these idiots that they don't know is any different than what it appears to be. Like, I don't know why that person gets blamed for being like,
they're operating with imperfect information
and being told these are great sound investments for you. Do this.
Right.
And then like he, in his review, he's like, we should blame the consumer a little bit. But he says that The Big Short is cleverly scripted, skillfully acted, energetically edited, darkly humorous, and highly entertaining. See it. But remember that its screenwriters spun historical lead into Oscar gold. So he liked the movie. He just didn't like that that it's anti-business, basically.
Okay, so I'll give myself like A- there in terms of predicting.
No, I would give it a
An A.
An AA. What about Vice?
But not AAA like the credit rating. Okay, sorry. Vice. I feel like he did not like that at all.
He did not like it at all. He uses a slightly offensive term to describe it. He calls it a spastic mess.
I mean,
but he
don't
loved Christian
disagree.
Bale. Yeah. He
Jesus
loved Christian
Christ.
Bale's performance, although he does point out in his review that he's like, Christian Bale, I think he got too fat for this. He says that Christian Bale overdid the pie eating to build himself a Winnie the Pooh tummy, which is a funny sentence.
Thank God McKay did not subject us to Chaney walking around with the shirt on and no pants.
Oh, God, I wish. That would have been great. Oh, my God. The makeup department would have gone nuts on those gams.
Nuts on those nuts. Sorry.
Hey. And this is my favorite part of Armond Gold. I wrote, this is Armond Gold, and I just called him Armond Gold instead of Armond White. But this part was, he has parentheticals for the things that happen, like his opinion on, he's basically describing the events, and then basically.
And then injecting.
In parentheticals, he's giving you the Armond White's real version. So he says, I did get a chuckle out of McKay's splenetic attacks on the Koch brothers, parentheses, heroes, how the American Enterprise Institute and the Heritage Foundation changed the way Americans think, parentheses, lovely, the way Bush axed the estate tax by dubbing it death tax, smart.
Once again, where's Luntz?
Okay, yeah. And a shot of Ronald Reagan removing Jimmy Carter's White House solar panels,
I actually...
parentheses, saving the people money.
That made me laugh both the first time I saw it and when I rewatched it last night. That is a pretty funny way of communicating the political tide turning of like Jimmy Carter installs them, but I takes them down immediately.
But also Armond White's idea that is the funniness is that it saved the people money is the ridiculous. Don't Look Up. What do you think he said?
I would imagine that it's didactic in nature because I think it is the most it's the most explicitly whiny preachy, and I think that tone he does not like at all. I feel like maybe there's some performances in it that he might have found funny, like the lampooning of Cate Blanchett's character because it's criticizing liberal media.
I mean, you're good at this game.
Ooh.
We called Don't Look Up the worst film of 2021, and that it's an apocalyptic comedy by atheist liberals that doesn't even come close to being scary or a plausible allegory. And then he's got just a fucking, as he does every once in a while, just a spot-on analysis, honestly.
Right? Why? I like him, you know.
Yeah. Don't Look Up's Don't Look Up is Netflix's evasive, misstated excuse for political satire that fails very badly because writer-director Adam McKay doesn't grasp his own political prejudices.
So close and yet so far.
Yeah. Which, I mean,
Mr.
like,
White.
we're going to disagree on what his political prejudices are, but if we don't have to unpack that, then that's a perfectly... I agree. But yeah, I don't think it was any shock that Armond White was just not a fan of these movies.
Yeah, I wasn't
they were not made
anticipating.
for him.
Right. He is not. He is for sure. When we have wavered on who the target audience is for some of these films, we know for a fact that it's not Mr. White.
Yeah. He also, like, very specifically, now I didn't write it down, but had a thing about why he didn't include Don't Look Up in his better than list. I'm going to find it really quick because he says...
See, not want to even deign to give it more inches in his writing.
Okay, the reason I didn't put it in there is because I have no fucking clue what movie this is that he said was better than Don't Look Up. But he says, this is the very first sentence of his review. Readers have asked why my better than list did not include a bad luck banging is better than don't look up entry. My answer comes from W.C. Fields. Too blatant. So he's apparently too obvious to say that this movie I've never heard of is...
Say the movie again?
Bad luck banging?
Oh, no.
Or loony porn is the full title. I have no fucking idea what this movie is.
Loony porn? Oh...
Not that that's another title for it. That seems to be the full title. Bad luck banging or loony porn is the full title.
Yes, I think this is on my watch list, honestly. Yeah, it's like Romanian, I think.
Okay.
Yes, and it won the Golden Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival.
I guess I'm trying to figure out why he thinks that's too blatant of a comparison. Forced to meet the parents. It's about a school teacher who finds her career and reputation under threat after a personal sex tape is leaked on the internet. Forced to meet the parents, demanding her dismissal, Emmy refuses to surrender to their pressure. All right, that sounds cool, but I don't understand.
Yeah, maybe it's just preachy.
I guess.
Maybe it's just also preachy.
But anyways, Armond White, we love him.
Yeah, I'd love to try and unfold the map that is
You're pretty good at it, honestly, because that was
mind.
all three were spot
you
on.
know, spelunking in the crevices of Armond White's mind.
Hell yeah, that's the title of this episode.
So next time when we come back, we'll be digging into the next movie in our Clint Eastwood series, Gran Torino. So looking forward
to learning why it's okay to be a little bit racist sometimes.
To taking a scalpel to his anti-Vietnamese racism.
I do find that movie interesting, though, that is something he wanted to explore at all, honestly.
Yeah, I assume it's the the specific generational cohort brain worms of being an adult during the Vietnam War, and being a conservative adult during the Vietnam War in particular. But I hope that all you listeners have a great rest of your weekend, and tune in next time to hear what we have to say about another one of Clint Eastwood's later films.
Oh.
Sure, bangers.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.